Chapter 142. Little brother. You. Where did you get these things? Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale and her voice was trembling. A bad feeling rose in her heart. Sis, don't worry about it. I bought this set of clothes for you. Oh right, this set of clothes is for Blockhead. We won't be eating at home today. I'll treat you to a restaurant outside. Gu Beichen said as he put down the gifts in his hands. He did not notice the tears in Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes. Slap! Suddenly, a loud slap landed on the young man's face. The young man was stunned and only then did he see the tears on Gu Xiaoxiao's face. Sister! You, tell me, where did you get these things? Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes were red as she questioned the young man loudly. The young man was really panicking, because in his memory, his sister rarely hit him, and she had never shed a single tear in front of him. No matter how hard it was for his sister, she had always bitterly supported this family. But what did he see today? His sister was crying. That kind of sorrowful cry made the young man extremely flustered. He even forgot about the pain on his face. He lowered his head nervously and said in a trembling voice, "Sister, don't be angry. These things were given to me by my classmates." For you? Gu Xiaoxiao was disappointed and said in a choked voice, "Come, tell me. Why did your classmates give you these expensive things? Where did you get the money to treat us to a meal?" This. Faced with Gu Xiaoxiao's questioning, the young man's face turned red and he did not know how to answer. Speak. Gu Xiaoxiao choked and reprimanded. Yes. I beat up Li Huan and the rest. They said that I'll be their boss in the future, and the other classmates gave me money, and called me Brother Chen. Gu Beichen said with a red face. I'll beat you to death, you bastard. Without waiting for the young man to finish, Gu Xiaoxiao's tears flowed down. She picked up a feather duster and hit the young man hard. The young man cried out, but he did not dare to dodge. What did I teach you? Although we are poor, we never bully others. What did you do? Gu Xiaoxiao hit the young man hard, but tears kept falling from her eyes. Sister, I know I was wrong. The young man grimaced from the beating, but his sister's crying made him feel even worse. Scram. From now on, I don't have a brother like you. Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes reddened, and the feather duster in her hand fell to the ground. Sis, I really know I was wrong. Please don't chase me away. The young man was truly panicking. He cried out loud and knelt in front of Gu Xiaoxiao, begging for his sister's forgiveness. You're not allowed to eat tonight. Go kneel in front of our parents' memorial tablets and repent. After all, he was her younger brother. How could Gu Xiaoxiao bear to chase him away? However, the young man's actions were unacceptable to Gu Xiaoxiao. As the young man sobbed, he finally knelt in front of his parents' memorial tablets to repent. This made Gu Xiaoxiao bite her lips and run out of the house. At this moment, Yi Xian watched this scene silently, his deep eyes calm. He slowly walked out of the door, only to see Gu Xiaoxiao squatting in the small courtyard, secretly weeping. You've lost. Yi Xian said in a hoarse voice. Yes, I've lost. Are you happy now? Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes were red as she reprimanded Yi Xian loudly. Why should I be happy? Yi Xian's voice was calm as he slowly walked to Gu Xiaoxiao. He looked at her through his hair and said, I just want to tell you something. This world isn't as beautiful as you think it is. Human nature is greedy and selfish. The so-called kindness is just your wishful thinking. That's enough. I don't want to listen to you. Gu Xiaoxiao covered her ears and shouted. Unfortunately, Yi Xian's voice continued to ring out. Did you see that? Because your brother defeated the people who bullied him, those people were afraid. They were fearful. Not only did they give your brother money, they even treated him as their boss. This is the law of the jungle. This is the most fundamental thing in this world. Hearing Yi Xian's theory, Gu Xiaoxiao laughed bitterly. Her eyes gradually calmed down, and she looked at Yi Xian and said, "You're wrong. You're very wrong. I don't deny that this world might be like what you said, but if everyone loses their kindness, then the order of this world will collapse sooner or later. What's the point of us humans living then? It seems like you still believe in your theory." Yi Xian slowly shook his head. "That's right. I believe that the world has its current vitality because of love. Look at these exotic beasts wreaking havoc all over the world. Aren't there also many fearless heroes protecting us, allowing us to live well?" Gu Xiaoxiao said firmly. "All right, then I'll come with you to see if this world is like what you said." Yi Xian slowly nodded, then turned around and walked back into the house. At the same time, the East Sea was surging with waves. The sky was dark and gloomy, and there were even terrifying thunderbolts raging in the clouds. Splash! 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 The waves hit the pier, overturning countless boats. A bloody light floated in the waves. When the waves receded, a terrifying bloody figure stood in front of the pier. He looked at the humans in front of the pier, and his bloodthirsty eyes were filled with extreme brutality. "Blood food, so much blood food, eat them, restore my supreme cultivation base." The bloody figure roared and suddenly turned into hundreds of bloody lights. They strangely and cruelly pounced on the people on the pier. "Ah! What is this thing? Help!" The fishermen screamed and ran for their lives. However, under the brutal devouring of the bloody soul, these fishermen were all turned into dried corpses. It was as if they had died from having their blood sucked dry. Kakik! The bloody figure appeared again and laughed eerily. "Blood food is not enough. I need more. The bloody figure's aura was brutal. He walked into the distance, and the direction he was heading was actually the little river village where Yi Xian was. Along the way, he killed countless people. Countless people were turned into dried corpses and died tragically in the bloody figure's hands. Little River Village, Gu family's house. Several days passed. The young Gu Beichen did not go to school in town. Instead, he stayed at home to reflect on his mistakes. It was also in these few days that Gu Xiaoxiao and Yi Xian were in a state of cold war. At night, the sky was filled with stars. A ray of moonlight shone down, illuminating the little river village. "Sister, I'm hungry," Gu Beichen said, feeling wronged. Gu Xiaoxiao sighed helplessly. She took out the food she had prepared from the kitchen and looked at Yi Xian with a complicated expression. However, she still called out to him, "Silly blockhead, come and eat." Obviously, although Gu Xiaoxiao was unhappy with Yi Xian for instigating her brother, this lady was kind-hearted and always remembered Yi Xian in her heart. Chapter 143. Although Gu Xiaoxiao was displeased with Yi Xian's instigation of her younger brother, she was a kind-hearted girl and always remembered Yi Xian in her heart. When the three of them sat at the dining table, the young man wolfed down his food with an indescribable satisfaction on his face. He even smiled at his sister from time to time, which made Gu Xiaoxiao's anger dissipate. "Just eat. Stop making faces," Gu Xiaoxiao scolded jokingly. "Got it, sister." The young man stuck out his tongue. Bored, Gu Xiaoxiao turned on the television and an interview program appeared on the screen. "Sister, look. It's Sword God Yi." When the young man, Gu Beichen, saw the program on the television, he cheered. On the television screen, a white-haired young man holding a 3-foot-long sword was being interviewed by the host. Gu Xiaoxiao focused her attention on the television screen. It's Qingning TV station's honor to have Senior Sword God for this interview. I wonder why Senior Sword God doesn't create a martial arts alliance to fight against the beasts, the host asked with a smile. Yi Lingtian was clearly over 100 years old, but he had sharp eyebrows, bright eyes, and an extraordinary temperament. He looked more like a young man. He said slowly, "One sword is enough for me. Why would I need the help of other juniors? Domineering and not modest at all." This was Yi Lingtian's answer. It made the host feel awkward, not knowing how to continue the topic. Ahem. The host coughed softly to hide his awkwardness and continued, "It's rumored that you've been wanting to take in a girl as your successor, but this girl has always rejected you. Is that true?" The host's question made Yi Lingtian fall silent. After a few breaths, he slowly nodded and said, "That's right. There are not many people who can catch my eye. This woman is extremely talented. She is indeed a cultivation genius that is hard to come by in 100 years. It's rumored that this girl's name is Linglong. She has always rejected you because of one person. This person is Mr. Yi Xian, who once repelled the beast tide. What are your thoughts on this?" When the host mentioned the name Yi Xian, Yi Lingtian's expression turned ugly. He then laughed contemptuously and said, "In the Grand Xia Kingdom, Yi Lingtian, have only lost once in my life, and that person was the world's #1 expert, Shen Juexian. Other than Shen Juexian, I have never admired anyone else. In the past 100 years, no one has been able to take 3 of my swords. How can a junior be compared to me?" Hearing Yi Lingtian's words, the host suddenly became excited. Although Yi Lingtian did not point his finger at Yi Xian, the disdain in his words was obvious. This was big news and would definitely increase the TV station's ratings. "Senior Sword God, please don't blame him. Legend has it that Mr. Yi once killed Li Huantian and the Heavenly Sword God on the spot. With his cultivation, isn't he your—" Without waiting for the host to finish, Yi Lingtian sneered and said, "Li Huantian and Ba Dao are just losers to me. This interview is over." "Wow, Senior Sword God is so cool." The young man, Gu Beichen, was so excited that he danced. Yes, although Senior Sword God is a little overbearing, he has been killing exotic beasts all over the place. This is enough to earn our respect. Gu Xiaoxiao nodded and praised. At this moment, Yi Xian indifferently watched the program on the television and didn't say anything. This caused the siblings to feel slightly strange. The youth was even more curious as he asked, "Blockhead, why aren't you excited at all when you see Sword God Yi?" "Why should I be excited? He's just an ant," Yi Xian said indifferently. He picked up the glass of water and took 2 sips. His posture was extremely calm. Hearing Yi Xian's words, the siblings had strange expressions. Obviously, Yi Xian was too arrogant. He did not even take Yi Xian seriously. "Ah! Help, help!" Just as the young man was about to ask, he heard a large number of terrified voices coming from Little River Village. The siblings' expressions changed, not knowing what had happened. Yi Xian narrowed his eyes. A blood-red light flashed across his eyes. His divine sense spread out, and an extremely bloody scene appeared in his mind. Blood soul? Interesting. It seems that the time to witness human nature has finally come, Yi Xian murmured, but it did not attract the siblings' attention. "Let's go and see what's happening," Gu Xiaoxiao said anxiously. She put on a coat, pushed open the door, and ran out. The young man quickly followed behind his sister and left the house. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes were as deep as an ancient pool. He looked at the siblings' backs and murmured, "Gu Xiaoxiao, when humans face death, when these so-called kind villagers reveal their despicable nature, will you still insist on the theory that humans are inherently good?" In Little River Village, a large number of villagers gathered in the village center. They were screaming in fear because a bloody figure was walking towards them. The brutal and cruel smell of blood around him made the villagers feel even more uneasy. "Blood food. So much blood food," the bloody figure said excitedly. A ray of bloody light spurted out and instantly turned a villager into a dried corpse. The thick blood soul essence was directly swallowed into his stomach, and the bloody figure let out a satisfied howl. "What? What is this thing?" a villager shouted in fear. "My child's father," a woman cried out loudly. "Everyone, don't be afraid. Let's fight it out with him." Kitchen knives, hunting guns, and even hoes. All kinds of weapons appeared in the hands of the villagers. They surrounded the bloody figure tightly, but their faces were extremely pale. "Fatherly, what happened?" Gu Xiaoxiao hurried over with her little brother. When she saw the horrifying bloody figure, her face instantly turned pale, and a trace of panic flashed across her eyes. "Xiao, we don't know where this monster came from. He has already killed many of our villagers. We must not let him go." Father Li held a hunting gun and shouted loudly. "Sister, I'm scared." The young man, Gu Beichen, held his sister's hand and looked at the horrifying bloody figure with extreme fear. Clearly, the dried corpse under the bloody figure's feet was enough to make him feel terrified. Don't be afraid. Sister is here." Although Gu Xiaoxiao was also very scared, her brother was by her side. She tried her best to calm herself down. "Kill him." Father Li pulled the trigger directly. The homemade hunting gun spewed out a large amount of sand bullets. A large number of villagers also held weapons and slashed at the bloody figure. Kakik. Blood Shadow let out a strange laugh. He did not dodge the villagers' attacks, and the so-called spear fire passed through his body. His blood-red palm continuously tore apart the villagers, excitedly devouring their blood soul essence. It was an extremely terrifying sight to behold. Chapter 144. One by one, the villagers died tragically on the spot. Their tragic cries echoed throughout the village. The villagers retreated, their faces filled with fear. They realized a terrifying fact. They couldn't kill this monster at all. Instead, people kept dying tragically in its hands. "Run!" One of the villagers couldn't stand the fear anymore. He dropped the hoe in his hand and fled into the distance. As if there was a chain effect, when the villager fled, the rest gave up resisting and fled in all directions. Obviously, they didn't want to die in the hands of this monster. At the same time, Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale. She was also fleeing with her brother. But how could the blood shadow give up on this bloody feast? "All of you are my food. No one can escape," the blood shadow said cruelly. He turned into a bloody light and pounced on the fleeing villagers. Old Man Li stumbled and fell to the ground. His eyes were filled with despair and fear. But when he saw the siblings running in front of him, his eyes turned and he shouted at them, "Xiao, take your brother and leave Little River Village. I'll block this monster for you." Hearing Father Li's heroic voice behind her, how could Gu Xiaoxiao have the heart to abandon him? Suddenly, Gu Xiaoxiao turned and ran towards him. She wanted to help Old Man Li up and escape this terrifying place together. "Sister." Gu Xiaoxiao's action made the young Gu Beichen's expression change. He didn't expect his sister to be so kind. She didn't care about her own safety to help others. Kakik. Blood food. What delicious blood food. All of a sudden, the blood shadow appeared in front of Old Man Li. Gu Xiaoxiao was helping him up. When they saw the blood shadow, Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes were filled with despair. "Xiao, I'm sorry," Father Li said viciously. Abruptly, he pushed Gu Xiaoxiao's body toward the blood shadow. Then, he ran away awkwardly. Old Man Li's push stunned Gu Xiaoxiao. She even forgot about the horror of the blood shadow. She couldn't understand why she would end up like this when she came to help Old Man Li's sister. Seeing that his sister was about to be killed by the blood shadow, Gu Beichen wailed and ran towards Gu Xiaoxiao in a frenzy, disregarding his own safety. "Little brother, don't worry about me. Hurry up and run." Blood Shadow had already reached out his multicolored palm towards Gu Xiaoxiao, but at this moment, Gu Xiaoxiao was still thinking about her brother. At this critical moment, an explosive sound rang out in the air, as though the earth itself was trembling. The terrifying blood-red figure was flung backwards as a slender figure appeared in front of Gu Xiaoxiao. After escaping death, it was like falling into a dream. When Gu Xiaoxiao saw the person in front of her, her eyes gradually turned red and a mist appeared in her eyes. "Blockhead, it's you?" Gu Xiaoxiao asked with a complicated expression. "Sister, are you all right?" The young man, Gu Beichen, stumbled over, his face covered in tears. At this moment, Yi Xian looked at Gu Xiaoxiao indifferently. His voice was calm and leisurely as he said, "Do you see that? At the moment of life and death, humans will reveal their despicable nature. The so-called kindness is just a joke." The despicable nature of humans once again entered Gu Xiaoxiao's ears. She slowly lowered her head as her body trembled slightly. Why? Why? Why is it like this? Gu Xiaoxiao suddenly raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. Her eyes were red and large amounts of tears flowed from her eyes. Because human nature is evil. This is the real world that you see. Yi Xian said calmly. Kakik. With a cruel and sinister laugh, the blood-red light rumbled and the blood shadow returned. However, the blood-red eyes that looked at Yi Xian were obviously filled with fear. You are very strong, scram. His roar could shatter mountains and rivers and shake the heavens and the earth. Yi Xian's simple word turned into a terrifying wave that sent the blood shadow flying again. The blood shadow screamed in horror and did not dare to approach Yi Xian again. Blood. Blood food. I'm so hungry, although the blood shadow lacked intelligence, he could still feel the terror of Yi Xian. Naturally, he did not dare to approach Yi Xian. Instead, he carefully chased after the other villagers who were fleeing. Ah! Another villager died tragically at the hands of the blood shadow. There was a miserable howl. Xiao Xiao, save me. A village girl was running away. When she saw that Gu Xiaoxiao was protected by Yi Xian and the blood shadow did not dare to approach, she panicked and begged loudly. Moo! Moo moo! I beg you. Please save them. Gu Xiaoxiao's face was full of tears. However, she kept shaking Yi Xian's arm, hoping that Yi Xian would save the villagers. Looking at the tears on Gu Xiaoxiao's face, Yi Xian was unmoved. He slowly shook his head and said, "In my opinion, your kindness is simply stupid. Besides, I won't save them." Why? Why? This monster is obviously afraid of you. Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale. She could not understand. Since Yi Xian was so powerful, why couldn't he save these innocent people? I'm not a saint, nor am I a hero. What does their life and death have to do with me? Why should I save them? Yi Xian's eyes were deep and his voice was calm. Moo moo, you're too heartless. The young Gu Beichen reprimanded loudly, if my sister didn't save you from the sea, how could you have survived until now? Ha! A cruel sneer appeared on Yi Xian's lips. He looked indifferently at the young man and said, "You're wrong. Even if it wasn't for your sister, I wouldn't have died in this world. Even if it was as you said, that your sister saved my life, I'll still save you and your brother today. That's considered repaying her kindness." You! The young man's face was red, but he could not refute. Little brother, don't say any more. Since he doesn't want to save them, we'll save them ourselves. Gu Xiaoxiao smiled sadly. She pulled her little brother and chased after the fleeing villagers. Looking at the siblings running away, Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and said, "Gu Xiaoxiao, your stupidity makes me very angry. Since you still haven't understood this world, let's see how laughable the kindness you believe in is." Yi Xian's aura was gloomy as he strolled forward. At the end of Little River Village was a raging river. This river was so deep that one could not see the bottom. If someone fell into the river, they would be drowned in an instant. It would be a sure death. It was impossible for anyone to get out of the river. At this moment, the villagers of Little River Village were gathered at the riverside in fear. Looking at the bottomless river, everyone's eyes were filled with despair. They had reached the end of the road. Behind them, the bloody figure was approaching step by step. This was a dead end. These villagers had no way of breaking out. Chapter 145. Not far away, the siblings were running towards the villagers with shovels and hatchets. When the villagers saw the siblings, surprise appeared on their faces. This was because when they were running away, they saw with their own eyes that it was Old Man Li who pushed Gu Xiaoxiao in front of Blood Shadow and then ran away alone. But why didn't Gu Xiaoxiao die? Why was she still alive? It's that person who saved Xiaoxiao. I saw him send the monster flying with my own eyes, a villager shouted excitedly as he pointed at Yi Xian in the distance, his eyes filled with hope. That's right. It's the person Xiaoxiao took in. He saved Xiaoxiao. The monster is afraid of him. He can definitely save us, a village girl said excitedly. As the villagers shouted excitedly, the despairing atmosphere eased a little. Old Man Li, who was in the crowd, looked embarrassed and ashamed, but there was also excitement in his eyes. Xiaoxiao, I've let you down. Can you forgive me? As soon as the siblings arrived in front of the villagers, Old Man Li wept bitterly and knelt in front of Gu Xiaoxiao. He kept kowtowing and apologizing to her, making people feel extremely pitiful at first glance. You scum, how can you do such a heartless thing? How can you let Xiaoxiao down? That's right. I've always respected you, but you've done such a thing. It's really shameful. Xiaoxiao, don't worry. When this monster leaves, we'll definitely seek justice for you. Many of the villagers spoke out and patted their chests in guarantee. Old Man Li kept kowtowing and apologizing to Gu Xiaoxiao amidst the curses. Old Man Li, get up. I really don't blame you. Maybe you were just anxious. After all, people do irrational things when they're in danger. Gu Xiaoxiao bit her lips and helped Old Man Li up. This made the villagers praise Gu Xiaoxiao for being a kind child. At this moment, Yi Xian stood in the distance. When he saw this scene, his eyes were extremely strange, and a trace of a contemptuous smile curled up from the corner of his mouth. Human nature is so despicable, but you're stupid and ignorant. Let me see when you'll wake up, Yi Xian muttered in a low voice. Kakik. Blood Shadow was laughing sinisterly, but he did not pounce at the villagers. Instead, he kept an eye on Yi Xian's movements. If this terrifying human wanted to attack him, he could only run away pathetically. After all, Blood Shadow could sense that he was no match for this human. However, even though Blood Shadow lacked intelligence, Yi Xian did not attack him even after such a long time had passed. He could sense that this terrifying human did not seem to have any intention of stopping him. Blood Shadow walked towards the villagers step by step. He was also testing Yi Xian's intentions. When he was less than 100 meters away from the villagers and discovered that Yi Xian still did not move, Blood Shadow finally relaxed. A cruel and terrifying bloody light erupted from his body. Food. My food. Seeing Blood Shadow approaching them step by step, the villagers' faces changed. Only then did they realize that Yi Xian was standing in the distance and did not move at all. This made a large number of villagers anxiously ask Gu Xiaoxiao, Xiaoxiao, quickly beg this master to kill this monster. He won't help us, Gu Xiaoxiao said with a bitter smile in the face of the villagers. Please. Why? A villager screamed. Because he's a heartless person, Gu Xiaoxiao murmured sadly. Poochie. Suddenly, just as the villagers were stunned, a terrifying bloody hand pierced through a villager's chest. A blood-curdling scream was heard, and the glaring blood made the villagers scream in horror. At this moment, Gu Xiaoxiao was fearless. She shouted, "Villagers, we can't count on anyone. Let's fight this monster to the death today." Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale, but she still stood out with a hatchet in her hand. Her eyes were filled with determination. Are you fucking kidding me? What do you want us to fight with? We can't kill this monster at all. Don't think too highly of yourself. Many villagers scolded and retreated continuously. They no longer had the humble attitude of trying to curry favor with Gu Xiaoxiao. However, there was a bottomless river behind them. They had no way to retreat at all. Looking at the angry faces of the villagers, Gu Xiaoxiao's face was pale. She never thought that these kind villagers would become like this. Were they still the villagers of Little River Village she knew? Ah! Don't! Don't kill me! While Gu Xiaoxiao was in a daze, Blood Shadow made his move cruelly. The villagers' corpses fell at his feet. A large amount of blood soul essence was devoured by him, turning them into dried corpses. When the villagers saw their companions die tragically in the hands of Blood Shadow, the fear in their hearts seemed to drive them crazy. People would either explode in silence or perish in despair. No one wanted to die. Even the villagers of Little River Village were no exception. And once a person went crazy, they could do anything. "You damn girl, come here." Suddenly, a sinister growl was heard. Old Man Li took 2 steps and quickly came in front of Gu Xiaoxiao. Before Gu Xiaoxiao could react, he snatched the hatchet from her hand and quickly placed it on Gu Xiaoxiao's throat. He then held Gu Xiaoxiao hostage and turned to Yi Xian to roar, "If you don't want her to die, chase this monster away. Otherwise, don't blame Lao Tzu for killing this damn girl." This scene made Gu Xiaoxiao's eyes glaze over. It was as if her soul had left her body. It was as if she had turned into a marionette, allowing Old Man Li to hold her hostage. A line of clear tears flowed from her eyes. "Let go of my sister." The young man, Gu Beichen, shouted in panic. He raised his fist and punched Old Man Li. However, before he could reach Old Man Li, he was kicked to the ground. "Little bastard, if you dare to cause trouble again, Lao Tzu will kill your sister first." Old Man Li's face was ferocious and his eyes were filled with madness. At this moment, all the villagers had gone crazy. They quickly came to Old Man Li's side and shouted, "Well done, Old Man Li. Since this person doesn't want to save us, we'll kill this damn girl." "That's right. Even if we die, we'll drag someone down with us." The villagers had completely forgotten their previous attitude. At this moment, they had all turned into inhumane beasts. They even held Gu Xiaoxiao hostage and looked at Yi Xian. It was obvious that they wanted him to kill this monster if he didn't want Gu Xiaoxiao to die. "Master, we just want to live. We don't mean to threaten you. As long as you chase this monster away, we'll let her go immediately." Old Man Li roared loudly, and the villagers all agreed. Chapter 146. Moo! Moo moo! Save my sister! I beg you! Save her! Young Gu Beichen staggered to Yi Xian's side and knelt before Yi Xian, kowtowing profusely. Large amounts of blood appeared on his forehead. At this moment, Yi Xian's aura was calm and emotionless. When he opened and closed his eyes, there was only an emotionless look. "Gu Xiaoxiao, do you see this? Your kindness can't exchange for the world's love for you. When your despicable nature is exposed, do you still think that your beliefs are right?" Like a thunderclap from the 9th heaven, like the waves of the vast ocean, Yi Xian's voice resounded in all directions, waking Gu Xiaoxiao from her daze. A sacred smile appeared on her face. "Silly Moo Moo, Xiaoxiao is very happy to have met you. Because you made Xiaoxiao understand that this world is so colorful. If there is an afterlife, I still hope to be a kind person." A gust of wind blew, lifting Gu Xiaoxiao's black hair. She was like a spirit in the wind, smiling kindly at the world. She ignored the hatchet at her throat and pushed Old Man Li away. Like an angel, she opened her arms and welcomed the bloody shadow. Poof! The horrifying bloody hand pierced through Gu Xiaoxiao's chest. Fresh blood spurted out, but Gu Xiaoxiao's face still had a kind smile. Even at death's door, it didn't change. "Sister!" Young Gu Beichen cried out at the sight of this. He ran towards his sister like a madman. This scene also caused the villagers to be dumbfounded. Every single one of them had extremely complicated expressions on their faces. Some of them even shed tears of shame. Rumble! Dark clouds covered the sky and terrifying lightning raged. Yi Xian stared blankly at Gu Xiaoxiao in front of him. The Tongtian blood light around him broke through the clouds, causing terrifying explosions to resound in all directions. The void was collapsing and the earth was shaking violently. With Yi Xian as the center, terrifying cracks spread under his feet. He walked towards Gu Xiaoxiao step by step. When he opened and closed his eyes, the mournful and crazy blood light seemed to be able to illuminate the world. Why? Why? Why are you still so stupid even when you are about to die? Yi Xian's aura was violent. He roared and questioned Gu Xiaoxiao. When he reached Gu Xiaoxiao, the bloody shadow screamed and retreated. Tell me, why? Why? Yi Xian clutched Gu Xiaoxiao's collar tightly. He was in great confusion. Gu Xiaoxiao's angelic smile was holy and loving. When Yi Xian saw Gu Xiaoxiao's smile, he stared blankly at the woman in front of him and clenched his fists tightly. Be myself, be myself. Yi Xian murmured. He seemed to have fallen into an indescribable state. Yes. Why do I cling to the troubles in my heart? Why do I cling to the things that happened in the mental demon dreamland? Actually, I only want to be myself, protect the people I want to protect. I have a clear conscience. This is the real Yi Xian, this is the real me. Ha ha ha, ha ha ha. I am the immortal heavenly lord, a cultivator in the crossing calamity stage, but I am not even as good as a weak woman in the mortal world. Yi Xian looked up at the sky and laughed bitterly. As he laughed, tears flowed down his cheeks. He finally understood himself at this moment, but the price he had to pay was Gu Xiaoxiao's death. As Gu Xiaoxiao was dying, she gently caressed Yi Xian's cheek and said in a daze, silly blockhead, can I see your face? Woo! Heaven and earth grieved. The wind howled. Yi Xian's black hair fluttered in the wind. Gu Xiaoxiao saw his delicate face. Silly blockhead, you are so handsome. Gu Xiaoxiao muttered. Her body gradually turned cold. The palm that was caressing Yi Xian's face powerlessly fell to the ground. From then on, she no longer had any life. Sister! Don't die! Gu Beichen cried out in grief. He shook his sister's arm continuously, but he could not wake Gu Xiaoxiao up. Heaven and earth were silent and everything was silent. Yi Xian stared blankly at the woman in his arms. The Tongtian blood light around him tore through the sky and caused the void in all directions to collapse violently. That terrifying power moved heaven and earth. Gu Xiaoxiao, you are not wrong. I am not wrong either. It is only this world that is wrong. Yi Xian gently placed Gu Xiaoxiao on the ground. He released a merciless and cold aura. Looking at the surviving villagers, a merciless and cruel look appeared in his eyes. The heavenly Tao is merciless and treats all living things like straw dogs. The Tao is merciless and buries the souls of the dead. The human Tao is merciless and can kill in the mortal world. Gu Xiaoxiao, let me purge this world of despicable people for you. Let these despicable people be annihilated. Kill! The sky was shaking and the earth was collapsing. Yi Xian's pair of sword fingers tore through the sky, and the monstrous blood light seemed to tear apart the heavens and earth. When he slashed out with his sword, an extremely terrifying sword chi filled the air and instantly enveloped the villagers. Don't kill me. I don't want to die. Miserable cries and blood splattered everywhere. Amidst the desperate cries of the villagers, they exploded into clouds of blood mist one by one. Even their souls were not left behind. They were completely annihilated in this world. Everything was silent. Heaven and earth were silent. Only the young man, Gu Beichen, was holding his sister's corpse and crying in grief. Yi Xian watched this scene silently and did not speak for a long time. Why? Why can't you save my sister when you are so powerful? If you had acted earlier, my sister would not have died. Suddenly, the young man raised his head and roared at Yi Xian angrily. Faced with the young man's angry questioning, Yi Xian did not say anything. He slowly inhaled and exhaled. Do you want revenge? Yes. I want to kill that monster and avenge my sister with my own hands. Gu Baichen roared loudly. The hatred in his eyes was almost tangible. Then put away your cowardly tears and come with me with your sister's corpse. Yi Xian said in a low voice. He turned and walked into the distance. The young man held back his tears and carried Gu Xiaoxiao's corpse to chase after Yi Xian. However, behind them, the small river village had already turned into an Azura slaughterhouse. Not a single person survived. The dense smell of blood drifted in the air, and the blood shadow had already fled. It was obvious that Yi Xian's terror caused him to be extremely fearful. Chapter 147. This was a place filled with green mountains and clear waters. There were towering green mountains and lush vegetation. A gentle breeze blew, bringing with it the fragrance of the plants. Above the mountain peak, a sea of clouds swirled. Yi Xian had his hands behind his back, calmly looking at the sea of clouds in front of him. No one knew what he was thinking. Life is like a dream and an illusion. The morning is like the morning dew, and the evening is like the sunset. Yi Xian murmured softly. He slowly turned to look at the young man behind him. When his eyes opened and closed, there was only indifference. Hatred can change a person, but it can also make a person crazy. Have you really decided to deviate from your sister's will and become an evil person that the world hates? Yi Xian said softly. At this moment, the young man hugged Gu Xiaoxiao's corpse in a daze. He smiled sadly and said in a low voice, "My sister was very kind, but what happened in the end? She's dead. She left me forever. Since this world is filled with evil, I'm willing to be the leader of all evil and end these evil people." His voice was powerful and firm. This was the attitude that the young man displayed. Huh. Yi Xian laughed. However, his laughter was very old and Gu Baichen did not know why Yi Xian was laughing. If you want to be the leader of all evil, you have to pay a certain price. And this price may be death. Are you willing? Yi Xian said deeply and looked directly at the young man. Blockhead, I'm willing. The young man was resolute and did not hesitate at all. My name is not Blockhead. My real name is Yi Xian. You can call me Mr. Yi. Now, you can sleep peacefully. When you wake up, you will face an extremely cruel test. Yi Xian flicked his finger and a bloody light shot towards the young man, causing him to faint instantly. Buzz! The bloody light was hazy and the void was stagnant. Gu Xiaoxiao's corpse floated in the void. Her kind smile before she died was reflected in Yi Xian's eyes. Gu Xiaoxiao, you used your life to help me find my true heart and help me walk out of my confusion. This is also a favor that I, Yi Xian, owe you. Yi Xian muttered to himself. Rumble. The 6 paths of reincarnation rotated and a door to hell opened. Yi Xian's expression gradually became gloomy and a low voice sounded from his mouth. Dark Crow. Your Majesty, what orders do you have? The Dark Crow's voice came from the door of hell. Help me check a person with the Book of Life and Death. Her name is Gu Xiaoxiao. I want to know if her soul has entered Fengdu's city. As you wish, Yama. In Necropolis, the Dark Crow quickly flipped through the Book of Life and Death. Lines of ancient seal characters floated before his eyes. After 10 breaths of time, the Dark Crow was startled. Through the open door of hell, he spoke with a trembling voice, reporting to Yama, the person you are looking for is not in Necropolis. In the mortal world, Yi Xian was startled. His eyes gradually narrowed as a trace of gloom flashed through his eyes. His voice was grave as he said, Impossible, the souls of mortals will enter hell after death. This is also a law of the heavenly Tao. How can this person not exist? Through the door of hell, the Dark Crow could clearly feel Yi Xian's dissatisfaction. This made him very nervous. Yama Lord, please be enlightened. The Book of Life and Death contains all the souls in Necropolis, but the person you are looking for is not in the book. Yi Xian's expression was extremely gloomy as his eyes flickered continuously. He believed that the Dark Crow would not dare to lie to him. After all, he had planted a blood soul mark in the Dark Crow's body. If the Dark Crow had any thoughts of betrayal, he would definitely be able to sense it. However, Gu Xiaoxiao was clearly dead. Why didn't her soul enter hell? Yama Lord, please be enlightened. Although the souls of mortals will be pulled into hell after death, if someone interferes and detains the souls after death, I'm afraid. The Dark Crow spoke hesitantly. You mean to say that someone detains Gu Xiaoxiao's soul? That's why she didn't enter hell and isn't shown in the Book of Life and Death? Yi Xian's voice was cold as he had a faint guess in his heart. I'm not sure, but it's very likely. The Dark Crow spoke respectfully. You can leave now. Yi Xian spoke coldly as the door of hell slowly closed. On the peak of the mountain, Yi Xian looked in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain. His eyes were deep and frightening. Yuan Ling, is it you? Yi Xian muttered to himself. Yi Xian knew that only Yuan Ling had such means and paid so much attention to him. Yi Xian also knew that Yuan Ling had always been scheming against him. Sooner or later, there would be an earth-shattering battle between the two of them. It was just that they had yet to shed all pretense of cordiality. Perhaps some people would ask why Yi Xian didn't directly go to Yuan Ling. However, the truth was that Yi Xian wasn't confident. Yes, he wasn't confident. Why did Yi Xian want to become an immortal in the mortal world? It was because he could only use some of the forbidden techniques in the Immortal Sutra after becoming an immortal. At that time, it would be the time for him to shed all pretense of cordiality with Yuan Ling. He was also confident that he could suppress Yuan Ling and see what kind of conspiracy he had. Yi Xian also knew that Yuan Ling had always been wary of him. This fear came from the heaven-destroying halberd. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Yuan Ling would never shed all pretense of cordiality with him. This was also one of the reasons why the two of them were at peace. If this woman's soul was really imprisoned by you, then what do you want to do? Don't tell me you can't hold it in any longer and are finally going to make a move? Yi Xian's eyes narrowed as a cruel sneer appeared on the corner of his mouth. He looked in the direction of Heartbreak Mountain as a cold expression quietly flashed across his face. A grave mound was piled up with yellow soil. Yi Xian stood with his hands behind his back. The young Gu Beichen kept kowtowing to the grave. His face was full of tears and a strong sense of sadness spread throughout his body. If you're done crying, then follow me. Yi Xian led the way and the young man took a deep look at his sister's grave. Then he got up and chased after Yi Xian. Splash splash splash. There was a 1,000-foot waterfall and a huge green rock. The huge water flow poured down and hit the green rock continuously. The loud sound of the water made one's eardrums buzz and dizzy. I want to cultivate martial arts to avenge my sister. You can just teach me martial arts. Why did you bring me here? Looking at the 1,000-foot waterfall, Gu Beichen was puzzled. Slap! Suddenly, there was a loud slap. A red handprint appeared on the young Gu Beichen's face. The young man covered his face and looked at Yi Xian in shock. He couldn't believe that he had been slapped so hard. You hit me? You dare to hit me? You killed my sister and now you dare to hit me? Although Gu Beichen had experienced the death of his family and had matured a lot, he was still a youth after all. In his heart, he was already dissatisfied with Yi Xian for not saving his elder sister. At this moment, this slap completely allowed him to vent his dissatisfaction. Chapter 148. Firstly, I really don't like your attitude. Secondly, I don't owe you and your sister anything. Thirdly, you should thank me for giving you the chance to become a strong person. You shouldn't look at me with such hatred, Yi Xian said calmly. You bastard! If you hadn't come, my sister might not have died, Gu Beichen roared. Smack! Another slap rang out and the young man fell to the ground. Dark red blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian reached out and grabbed the young man's neck, lifting him into the air. Kid, you can hate me, but I have to tell you that I'll use the cruelest method to train you. You'll only have the right to hate me if you survive. Yi Xian smiled coldly. His smile was indescribably strange and terrifying. It made the young man's heart turn cold. He felt that something bad was about to happen. Bang! Suddenly, Yi Xian threw the young man into the pool, drenching him. He then pointed at the giant green rock that was being hit by the 1,000-foot waterfall and said, "Your mission today is to climb up this green rock. If you can't complete the mission I've given you, I'll let you know what it means to live a life worse than death." Looking at the terrifying force of the 1,000-foot waterfall, Gu Beichen's expression changed. He shouted at Yi Xian, "You're crazy. The force of this waterfall is so terrifying. I'll die before I can climb up the green rock." As the young man spoke, he kept swimming towards the lake. It was obvious that he couldn't do as Yi Xian said. Suddenly, a willow branch had appeared in Yi Xian's hand at some point in time. Under the infusion of the blood light, the willow branch instantly straightened and violently lashed out at the youth with an extremely terrifying force. Smack! There was an explosion in the air. Before the young man could climb up to the shore, his back was torn open. Large amounts of blood flowed out and he howled in pain. "Yi Xian, you bastard! I'm going to kill you!" The young man roared, his eyes full of hatred. "Trash like you! Pa pa pa!" The willow whip whizzed through the air and struck Gu Beichen, causing him to bleed profusely. His cries grew weaker and weaker. "If you can't climb up this rock today, then die under my whip," Yi Xian said coldly. It was obvious that he wasn't just joking. If the young man dared to disobey his orders, Yi Xian would really beat Gu Beichen to death. "Yi Xian, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to avenge my sister." The youth's eyes were bloodshot as he glared at Yi Xian. Then, he swam towards the blue stone in the middle of the lake with all his might. At this moment, Yi Xian held the willow whip in his hand and looked coldly at the figure of the young man in the water. A cold smile appeared on his face. How could Yi Xian not know that because of Gu Xiaoxiao's death, not only did the youth have an enormous hatred for the villagers and Blood Shadow, but he also had a deep hatred for him in his heart. However, Yi Xian didn't care about this kind of hatred. Since Gu Beichen wanted to avenge his sister, then let him do it. Moreover, Yi Xian believed that Gu Beichen would become the sharpest knife in his hand in this kind of hatred. He would kill all living things for him and eventually become a terrifying existence like Azura. Perhaps some people would ask why Yi Xian had such a peerless cultivation. Why did he have to do something superfluous and just kill the young man? Why would there be so much trouble? However, Yi Xian knew that when a kind person turned into an evil person, such a person was undoubtedly the most terrifying. Yi Xian also knew that he lacked such a person under his command, and Gu Beichen was the best candidate. Moreover, in the future, if Yi Xian had to deal with insignificant people personally, it would be a demeaning act. In the pool, the 1,000-foot waterfall slammed down as the young man struggled in the water. Every time he touched the green rock, the terrifying water current would smash him into the bottom of the water. Gu Beichen spat out blood and even some of his bones were broken. However, with the support of the hatred in his heart, Gu Beichen relied on his strong willpower to climb up the green rock. The sun set in the west and night fell. In the middle of the pool, the young man was covered in blood. His broken hands gripped the green rock tightly and refused to let go. No matter how the terrifying water current hit him, he gritted his teeth and climbed up. Finally, this time, the young man wasn't hit by the water current. He had just climbed up the green rock when he shouted weakly at Yi Xian, "I did it! I did it, bang!" Gu Beichen finally couldn't take it anymore and was hit by the water current again. At this time, he fainted. A blood-red light lifted him up and shot him directly towards Yi Xian. His flesh was lacerated and his bones were broken. Blood kept flowing out of his mouth. This was the young man's current condition. If no one treated him, it wouldn't be long before Gu Beichen died here. Looking at the scene before him, Yi Xian's eyes didn't have the slightest bit of pity. A spot of blood-red light appeared on his fingertip and he suddenly pointed it at the young man. The young man groaned and slowly opened his eyes. Smack! The willow whip flew across the sky and whipped down. Immediately, the young man's broken body staggered and he let out a muffled cry of pain. Yi Xian's cruel voice rang out at this moment. Since you're not dead yet, sit up. Cultivate according to this technique until tomorrow morning. If you can't reach the first level of this technique, I'll kill you. Yi Xian said coldly and threw a book in front of the young man. When he took a step forward, his entire body mysteriously disappeared. Yi Xian, I'll definitely surpass you. I definitely will. Gu Beichen's face was full of tears. The pain in his body and mind seemed to be tormenting him to the point of insanity. His hands were already badly mangled, but he still held tightly onto the book Yi Xian threw down. He used the moonlight to quickly flip through it. High in the sky, in the void. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the clouds and looked down at the young man's cultivation. His voice was cold and emotionless. The blood demon scripture is an evil technique of the devil Tao. Those without great hatred cannot cultivate it. Every full moon night, you will suffer the pain of being bitten by thousands of ants. If you can endure these 3 months of cultivation, you will completely become a strong person of this era. If you can't, you will also die and become a wisp of smoke and disappear from the world. Yi Xian slowly closed his eyes and breathed in the waning moon high in the sky. As he breathed in and out, his body glowed. This was the light of the immortal spirit, the light of the great Tao. It was a sign that Yi Xian was gradually moving towards the late stage of the tribulation stage. Time flew by like a shuttle. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had passed. And in these 3 months, young Gu Beichen had undergone extremely terrifying changes. Relying on his inner hatred and willpower, the young man finally cultivated to the first level of the blood demon scripture. It was also at this moment that his body was completely transformed. His originally broken body became round and flawless under the blood demon scripture's restoration. However, the cruel training had not ended. Instead, it had just begun. Chapter 149. At sunrise, Yi Xian held a willow whip in his hand and lashed the young man viciously. Every time the whip landed, the young man's skin would split open. The bloody whip marks were all over the young man's body. This was not the end. Yi Xian made the young man struggle to lift a 250-pound rock and run in the forest. If the young man ran too slowly, the willow whip in his hand would fall mercilessly on him. At noon, the young man held the huge rock in his hand and let the 1,000-foot waterfall wash over him. The painful torture almost drove the young man crazy. In the afternoon, Yi Xian threw the young man into the valley. There were poisonous insects and ferocious beasts everywhere. He fought for his life and suffered unimaginable torture. But the cruel torture was not over. When the young man was on the verge of death, night fell. Yi Xian brought him out of the valley and lashed him viciously like a whip. The young man cried out in pain and begged Yi Xian for mercy, but Yi Xian did not show any mercy. At night, under Yi Xian's cruel torture, the young man endured his physical and mental exhaustion and cultivated the blood magic scripture under the moonlight. The days passed one by one. Gu Beichen went from crying and begging for mercy to enduring silently. It was as if he had slowly gotten used to this life and death training. Even his clear and innocent eyes gradually became sinister and cold. The huge rock on Gu Beichen's back increased from 250 pound to 500 pound, then to 250 pound, and finally to 10,000 pound. The 1,000-foot waterfall could no longer cause any harm to the young man's body. The battle with the poisonous insects and ferocious beasts was also reversed. Countless ferocious beasts were torn in half by the young man. He was covered in blood and walked out of the valley alone with a cold aura. The blood magic scripture, level 1, level 2, level 3. It was only when the young man reached level 7 that his terrifying cultivation speed slowed down. In just 3 short months, the once kind-hearted young man had gradually become ruthless under the hellish training. His cultivation had even reached Xiantian realm level 9. He was only one step away from breaking through to the Xiantian realm and becoming one of the strongest people in the world. If this cultivation speed was spread to the outside world, it would shock everyone. But in Yi Xian's eyes, Gu Beichen's cultivation speed was not satisfactory. The rolling hills rose and fell as a small stream flowed. Beside the stream, Gu Beichen and Yi Xian stood opposite each other. The atmosphere was extremely oppressive. You're really a good-for-nothing. It's been 3 months and you still haven't broken through to the Xiantian realm, Yi Xian said coldly. Yi Xian, suddenly, Gu Beichen laughed coldly as he looked at Yi Xian with eyes filled with an extremely terrifying killing intent. But, it's enough to kill you. Roar! Gu Beichen roared like a ferocious beast. He broke through to Xiantian realm level 9 in an instant. It was obvious that he had been hiding his cultivation level for a long time. He wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to kill Yi Xian in one fell swoop. Gu Beichen's body blossomed with a resplendent bloody light as a pair of bloody hands violently grabbed towards Yi Xian's heart. From the looks of it, he simply wanted to take Yi Xian's life. Yi Xian, today is the day you die. Go to hell. Gu Beichen laughed sinisterly. He no longer looked like a kind-hearted young man. It was as if he had turned into a killing machine. His eyes were filled with cruelty and satisfaction. Suddenly, a translucent, jade-like palm appeared before Gu Beichen's eyes. His eyes widened in horror. Ka-cha! The sound of bones breaking was exceptionally ear-piercing. Gu Beichen's sternum caved in and he spat out mouthfuls of blood. His entire body flew out like a kite with a broken string and landed heavily on the ground. Thud, thud, thud. Yi Xian's expression was cruel and cold. He walked slowly towards Gu Beichen until he was beside the young man. His wide feet stepped on the young man's face, grinding it with force. He said coldly, "Not bad. You actually learned how to endure. Unfortunately, in my eyes, you're still just a piece of trash. I know you hate me, but it doesn't matter. As long as you can surpass me, you can attack me at any time. But remember, this is the first time. I can spare your life, but when you attack me a second time, think carefully. If you can't kill me, you'll become a corpse. Do you remember?" Yi Xian said coldly. I remember." The young man, Gu Beichen, looked humiliated and hateful. Piak! The willow whip flew through the air and landed on the young man's body. "Louder, I can't hear you." Yi Xian shouted. "I remember." Gu Beichen howled in pain. Piak, piak, piak. Yi Xian's expression was cold and emotionless. The willow whip in his hand landed on the young man, causing him to groan in pain. His twisted face showed how much pain he was in. Obviously, the willow whip in Yi Xian's hand was no ordinary whip. Otherwise, it wouldn't have caused such pain to the young man. This is a lesson. I hope you remember it. Get up now and leave this place with me. Yi Xian said coldly. He then put away the willow whip and walked out of the mountain. Capital City. It had been a year since Yi Xian disappeared. Not only was the Wu an agency looking for Yi Xian, but the father and son of the Yi family also sent people all over the world to find out about Yi Xian's whereabouts. Mama Yi, Yi Ling, and the rest couldn't sleep. They were afraid that Yi Xian would be in danger. In this year, the number of beasts in the world grew. What made people even more fearful was that the beast crisis had not been resolved. Some mysterious blood souls were wreaking havoc all over the world. If mutated beasts were enough to make humans feel uneasy, then these blood souls would simply make humans all over the world panic. This was because these blood souls were unpredictable, and ancient martial ability users were simply unable to kill these monsters. Countless humans had been slaughtered by the blood souls, causing humans all over the world to fall into extreme panic. At this time of global crisis, a piece of news spread to Capital City and caused a huge shock to the people of Xia country. In a small country like Japan, a cultivator from Japan had appeared out of nowhere. He held on to the Muramasa demon blade and was currently crossing the ocean towards Xia country. He had even sent out an invitation, hoping to experience the charm of Xia country's martial arts and use this opportunity to verify his cultivation. When such words spread to Xia country, it immediately caused the people of Xia country to be furious. This was because there was a hatred between the two countries that couldn't be washed away. This was simply a blatant provocation. And when this news spread, all the countries in the world focused their attention on Xia country's capital, wanting to watch a good show. At the same time, on the bustling streets of capital city, Yi Xian was strolling forward. The young man, Gu Beichen, followed behind him with a cold expression. The two of them were heading in the direction of the Yi family compound. Chapter 150. In the Yi family's courtyard. It was early in the morning and the sound of martial arts training could be heard from the Yi family's courtyard. In the center of the courtyard, Yi Ping and Yi Ling were practicing with each other, surrounded by many martial artists. "Second brother, your eagle claw technique is really powerful," Yi Ling said with a smile. "Little sister, don't praise me. You haven't used your true jade sword technique yet. Otherwise, I wouldn't be your opponent," Yi Ping said with a bitter smile. "Ah, if only big brother was here. With his martial arts, he would definitely teach us a lot of powerful things." Yi Ling sighed. "Okay, little sister, big brother's cultivation is peerless. He will definitely be fine. He will come back sooner or later," Yi Ping comforted. "Ling, it's time to eat." Mrs. Yi walked out of the inner hall and was calling for her son and daughter. She also let the siblings quickly enter the inner hall. "Father, mother, grandfather." As the siblings entered the inner hall, they greeted them one by one, making the father and son of the Yi family look relieved. They hurriedly asked the siblings to sit down and eat. A year was enough to change a lot of things. Clearly, the meticulous care of the father and son of the Yi family in the past year had also caused some things to change greatly. "Ah, if only Yi Xian was here. Then, our family would be really reunited." Yi Canghai sighed. At the mention of Yi Xian, a trace of sadness flashed across Mrs. Ye's eyes, and Yi Canghai's expression was also complicated. In the end, he sighed helplessly. Breakfast was in progress. The food was luxurious and exquisite, and there were several servants serving around. "Ling, you have been practicing martial arts every day. You should eat more." Yi Canghai picked up a piece of fish and placed it in Yi Ling's bowl, smiling dotingly. "Thank you, grandfather," Yi Ling said obediently. "Qiuyun, your body isn't well. You should eat more," Yi Canghai said softly. Mother Yi nodded but didn't say anything. The breakfast was passed with a strong sense of kinship, and there were even sounds of laughter from time to time. "Ah!" All of a sudden, a voice sounded, and two figures quietly appeared in the inner hall, making the faces of the martial artists guarding the Yi family change. "Audacious! Who dares to trespass into the Yi clan?" Before they could do anything, a cry of surprise rang out from Yi Ling's mouth. "Big brother? Xian. Xian Yi Xian." In the inner hall, the father and son of the Yi family stood up in surprise. Mother Yi and the others were even more excited. They quickly walked towards Yi Xian. Yi Xian's expression was calm as he silently watched the scene before him. A trace of self-mockery flashed across his eyes. "Mom, it looks like you've already forgiven the Yi family," Yi Xian said softly. Yi Xian's words stunned Mama Yi. How could she not know what Yi Xian was thinking? This also made Mama Ye's expression extremely complicated. "Big brother, you haven't been at home for the past year. It's all thanks to Grandpa and Father's care that little sister and Mother's health recovered so quickly. Besides, Grandpa and Father already know their mistakes. Let's just let bygones be bygones," Yi Ping comforted in a trembling voice. "Let bygones be bygones?" Yi Xian looked deeply at Mama Yi. His voice was calm as he said, "Mom, do you still remember how much you've suffered in the past 10 years? Do you really intend to forgive them? Xian, I. Mama Ye's expression was complicated, and she didn't know what to say. After a full 10 breaths, Mama Yi smiled sadly and said, Xian, I know you have hatred in your heart, but Ling and Ping are still young. Yi Zonghao is their biological father after all, I. At this point, Mama Yi couldn't continue. Big brother, let's be happy as a family. Let's forget those unhappy things of the past, Yi Ling interrupted at the right time. Shut up. Suddenly, Yi Xian's expression was cold as he roared at Yi Ling. This also made Yi Ling bite her lips tightly, and tears appeared in her eyes. This was because she had never seen Yi Xian get angry at her. This also made her feel extremely unfamiliar with Yi Xian. Mom, do you still remember? Yi Xian took a deep breath, and then slowly exhaled. His voice was even calmer as he said, when I was 5 years old, you dragged me and my little brother and sister out of the Yi clan. That day, it was snowy and cold. It was you who told me that from then on, I would never have any contact with the Yi clan. When I was 14 years old, I was suffering from a terminal illness and was bedridden. It was this so-called Yi Zonghao who sent someone to bring me a letter, telling me to fend for myself. At that time, you were heartbroken and weeping helplessly. Do you still remember? Yi Xian's fists were clenched, but he was smiling. However, his smile was full of bitterness. I know I was wrong. Yi Zonghao's face was bitter, and even his voice was trembling. Yi Zonghai was stunned speechless. He never thought that his son would be so heartless. This also made Yi Zonghai finally understand why Yi Xian had never forgiven him and his son. Bang! Suddenly, under the shocked gazes of everyone, Yi Xian knelt on the ground and kowtowed 3 times to his mother. This also made Mother Yi look at Yi Xian in a daze. A line of clear tears slowly flowed from her eyes, as if she felt that something extremely important was leaving her. Mom, you gave birth to me and raised me. In this lifetime, Yi Xian will never be able to repay you. However, today, your son will have to say goodbye to you and pursue the endless Tongtian path of immortality. From now on, you and I may never see each other again. Your son has let you down in this lifetime, so I will kowtow to you here. Yi Xian kowtowed 18 times in a row, then suddenly stood up and looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian. His voice was calm as he said, as a son, I cannot be filial to my mother. This is my life's greatest regret. If one day I find out that you did not treat my mother well, Yi Xian will exterminate your entire Yi clan and never reincarnate. After saying this, Yi Xian deeply imprinted his mother's face into his mind. Then, he abruptly turned around and strode out of the Yi clan's residence. Xian, Mother Ye's sobbing voice suddenly came from behind Yi Xian. It also made Yi Xian's footsteps stop. However, he forced himself not to turn around. Only a lonely and bleak voice came from his mouth. Mom, I'm sorry. In the end, I don't belong to this mortal world. I really have to pursue the Tongtian path of immortality. Yi Xian's figure gradually disappeared into the distance. Gu Beichen silently followed behind him until the two of them disappeared from the Yi clan's residence. It was as if they had never appeared in the Yi clan's residence. In the bustling city, the clamor of the people could not drown out the sadness in Yi Xian's heart. Actually, Mother Yi and the rest did not know that Yi Xian had returned to the Yi clan today to bring Mother Yi and the rest back to Jiangnan. Yi Xian had already thought it through. As a son, he had to be filial to his mother. It was just a short 100 years, so he could still afford to wait. However, when he saw the Yi clan's father and son, Mother Yi, and little sister happily eating breakfast, he finally understood something. Chapter 151. The father and son of the Yi family, his younger siblings, and of course, Yi Xian's mother. When they could sit together and have breakfast together, this was a complete family. Even though he had never forgiven the father and son of the Yi family, familial ties were something that could not be changed. This made his mother and sister forgive the Yi family. It was also at that moment that Yi Xian finally understood. Actually, wasn't this good? Although he had not been by his mother's side for a year, his younger siblings were filial to his mother, and the father and son of the Yi family were even more caring. His mother could also live a happy life. Perhaps, the only regret was that Yi Xian could not be by his mother's side and be filial to her. This was not only Mother Ye's sorrow, but also Yi Xian's regret. At this moment, Yi Xian could not help but think of a saying, "There is no way to have it both ways in this world." This sentence fully explained Yi Xian's current situation. His heart was like heaven and earth, and all rivers flowed into the sea. Yi Xian smiled. He was truly freed from his familial ties. Perhaps this was the best outcome for him. The Tong Tian Dao was right in front of him. He had completely let go of himself. From now on, he would be like a fish in the vast sea and a bird in the sky. The fetters of familial ties no longer existed. He would advance step by step until he stepped into the 9 heavens and looked down on all life. Yi Xian, you're indeed more ruthless than me. You can even give up on your family. I have to say I'm impressed. Gu Beichen sneered. Smack! A willow whip whizzed down and directly whipped Gu Beichen to the ground, causing him to groan. You need to call me Mr. Yi, not my real name. If there's a next time, I'll let you have a taste of what it means to be separated from one's bones and tendons. Yi Xian smiled slightly, causing Gu Beichen to glare hatefully at him. Then, he quickly got up from the ground and did not say another word. Wuan Agency, meeting room. Yi Xian sat at the head of the table while Yi Xian stood behind him. Fatso Huang excitedly reported to Yi Xian about the underworld's development over the past year. Sir, all of the Grim Reaper's personal guards have stepped into the innate realm, while the other 3 groups have already left for various parts of the world. Just the peripheral members of the Mansion of the Dead alone already number 30,000 people in the world. Very good. You did well. Yi Xian nodded slowly. After receiving Yi Xian's praise, Fatso Huang smiled obsequiously. He glanced at Gu Beichen from the corner of his eye and said, "Since this little brother is following you, I'm sure you're not an ordinary person. May I know your name?" Humph. Gu Beichen scoffed coldly. He was extremely disdainful of Fatso Huang's fawning attitude towards Yi Xian. Naturally, he could not be bothered with this person. Beichen, from now on, you will listen to Fatso Huang. You will do whatever he wants you to do. Do you hear me? Yi Xian said softly. What? Upon hearing Yi Xian's words, Gu Beichen's expression changed. He said, "Mr. Yi, are you mistaken? This damn Fatso is only at the innate realm. Why should I listen to him?" Ha! Yi Xian laughed coldly and said, "Do you believe that even if he's at the innate realm, killing you will be as easy as flipping his hand?" Him? Gu Beichen laughed contemptuously. He did not take Fatso Huang seriously at all. After all, he had undergone 3 months of hellish training. He was no longer the weak youth of the past. Fatso Huang, it's up to you whether you can make this kid listen to you or not. Yi Xian laughed mockingly. Mr. Yi, don't make fun of me. How can I be a match for this little brother? You really think too highly of me. Fatso Huang kept bowing to Yi Xian and praising Gu Beichen. His extremely humble attitude made the contempt in Gu Beichen's eyes thicken. However, he did not realize that Fatso Huang was secretly taking 3 steps closer to him. Little brother, you will be my big brother in the future. As long as you command, I will definitely obey. At this moment, Fatso Huang had already arrived in front of Gu Beichen. He even bowed respectfully. The fawning smile on his face was reflected in Gu Beichen's eyes. That's enough. Someone like you. Suddenly, without waiting for Gu Beichen to finish speaking, Fatso Huang was still smiling fawningly. However, a blue dagger had appeared in his hand out of nowhere. Before Gu Beichen could react, the dagger was suddenly pressed against his throat. This dagger is made from century-old cold iron. The blade is smeared with the world's most poisonous poison. If I cut your skin a little, you will die tragically on the spot. Do you believe me? Fatso Huang's fawning smile was no longer there. His face was filled with viciousness and malevolence. This made Gu Beichen's expression change drastically. He was completely stunned and speechless. Arrogant and conceited at such a young age. Today, I am the one who attacked you. If it were an outsider, wouldn't they have died in the other party's hands? Fatso Huang slowly withdrew his dagger and said coldly. You, shameless. You. This was a sneak attack. Facing Fatso Huang's reprimand, Gu Beichen roared indignantly. Idiot. In this world, the winner takes all. Only the living are strong. Who would care about a dead person? Fatso Huang sneered disdainfully and retreated to Yi Xian's side. Gu Beichen, remember this. Unless you have invincible power that can crush all schemes, the human heart is the most terrifying thing. Don't look down on any small fry. Perhaps it is these small fry that can make you die a horrible death. Although you have broken through to the innate stage, you still have a lot to learn. I believe that Fatso Huang can help you understand this world. Follow him. Only when you have learned all of Fatso Huang's abilities can you truly be of use to me. Yi Xian said coldly and waved his hand, instructing Fatso Huang to take Gu Beichen away. At this moment, the various team leaders of the Wu and department were already walking towards the meeting room. Mr. Yi, you're finally back. Tian Yu had just stepped into the meeting room when he hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian. The other team leaders did not dare to slight Yi Xian as well. They all knew how terrifying Yi Xian was. How could they not be respectful towards him? Tell me what happened in the past year. Yi Xian said softly. Mr. Yi, in the year that you disappeared, following Tian Yu's narration, Yi Xian finally understood the situation in the outside world. Firstly, there was an outbreak of mutated beasts all over the world. The blood souls were ruthlessly devouring humans. This was especially so in the Western countries. In the East, other than Xia country, which was still relatively peaceful, the other neighboring countries were also having a hard time because of the blood soul mutated beasts. In the midst of Tian Yu's narration, Yi Xian also heard of something. A Japanese martial artist had already arrived in Xia country. He was even challenging famous martial artists all over the country. But after a series of challenges, no one was a match for him. This Japanese martial artist was currently rushing towards the capital. Sword god Yiling Tian had even accepted his challenge. The two of them were about to engage in a world-shattering battle in the capital. And this battle was being watched by the entire world. Don't mention such trivial matters. I'm not interested in knowing. Without waiting for Tian Yu to continue, Yi Xian waved his hand and interrupted him. You mentioned that some mysterious forces have suddenly appeared all over the world. Do you have any leads on these forces? Yi Xian asked curiously. Mr. Yi, according to the intelligence, there are extremely mysterious forces spreading among the people all over the world. These forces' roots are unknown, but they keep absorbing mortals and even teach them some cultivation methods. Coincidentally, I happen to obtain a basic cultivation method. Please take a look, Mr. Yi. As Tian Yu spoke, he handed a book over to Yi Xian, allowing Yi Xian to flip through it casually. After a full 10 breaths of time, when Yi Xian closed the book, his expression gradually became strange. This was because he'd discovered something extremely interesting. Chapter 152. The book in Yi Xian's hand wasn't a martial arts cultivation method at all. It was a low-level qi refinement technique that was modified from a low-level qi refinement technique. There was even a method to devour blood energy. It was obviously something that came from a terrifying blood soul. Yi Xian clearly remembered that there were millions of blood souls that had escaped from the Blood Sea battlefield. Many of them were terrifying existences. They were high and mighty immortals when they were alive. Although they had fallen in the ancient war and their remnant souls were suppressed under the Blood Sea, they were still existences that could not be underestimated. Yi Xian deeply understood that the remnant souls of these immortals were not something that ordinary blood souls could compare to. They were extremely intelligent and could still vaguely remember what had happened when they were alive. They hid in the human world and constantly devoured the essence of blood souls. Their cultivation would improve by leaps and bounds. If this went on for a long time, their cultivation would gradually recover. At that time, the people of this world would be plunged into misery and suffering. This cultivation method was obviously passed down by one of the remnant souls of these immortals. But why did they do this? Yi Xian gradually fell into deep thought. A strange light appeared in his eyes. Clearly, Tian Yu and the others had not realized the true horror of the remnant souls of immortals. This game is getting more and more interesting. I hope you all can surface as soon as possible. Let me see what kind of terrifying means the immortals of the Earth Immortal world had. Yi Xian's eyes flashed with excitement as he murmured. It was no wonder that Yi Xian was so excited. If he could devour these remnant souls of immortals, his cultivation would have a qualitative improvement. It would not be impossible for him to quickly break through to the late stage of the tribulation stage and usher in the immortal ascension tribulation. Most importantly, Yi Xian clearly remembered that in the Blood Sea battlefield, these remnant souls of immortals had told Yi Xian that they had been killed by the primogenitor demon. They also told Yi Xian that the Immortal Sutra was a demonic sutra. How did the ancient war start? Who was the primogenitor demon? What kind of conspiracy did Yuan Ling have against him? Perhaps he could find the answers to all these mysteries from these remnant souls of immortals. After all, they more or less had some memories of their lives and could provide him with many clues. Mr. Yi, what did you say? Tian Yu asked. Tian Yu's voice jolted Yi Xian awake from his thoughts. After that, he smiled, you have done well. If there's any news regarding this, you must inform me at the first instant. A hint of surprise flashed across Tian Yu's eyes. Why didn't Mr. Yi pay attention to the blood soul beasts all over the world, nor did he care about the battle between the Japanese martial artists and sword god Yi? Instead, he cared about such a small matter. Although Tian Yu did not understand, he knew what to ask and what not to ask. This allowed him to suppress the doubts in his heart. He bowed to Yi Xian and asked, Yes, Mr. Yi. What do you plan to do next? Jingdu is not a place for me to stay. I will return to Jiangnan City. If you have any clues about these mysterious forces, you can send someone to Jiangnan City to find me. After saying this, Yi Xian stood up and walked out of the meeting room. This caused Tian Yu to be stunned. He hurriedly called out to Yi Xian and said, Mr. Yi, don't tell me you're not going to watch the competition between Sword God Yi and the Japanese? Ha! Yi Xian smiled disdainfully and said calmly, a battle between two ants can't arouse my interest. As Yi Xian's words entered their ears, not only was Tian Yu stunned, but the expressions of the other team leaders changed drastically. They looked at Yi Xian in shock. Although they knew that Yi Xian was very strong and had killed Li Huantian before destroying the heavenly saber god, Yi Lingtian's cultivation was much stronger than those two. Could it be that he wasn't a match for Mr. Yi? Although everyone had the same thought, they did not dare to ask. They watched as Yi Xian left the meeting room. Jingdu Airport. A private plane flying to Jiangnan City was parked there. A large Zhua character was printed on the fuselage. As the cabin door opened, Yi Xian boarded the plane with Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen. At the same time, on the other side of Jingdu Airport, another private plane landed. As the cabin door opened, a large number of bodyguards walked out of the cabin door. Countless reporters waited anxiously under the plane. When a Japanese martial artist walked out of the cabin door, many reporters took photos of him. Muramasa Haoyue, known as the Japanese martial god, was the strongest person in Japan. He once held the demon blade Muramasa and cut a terrifying sea beast into two with a slash. Since then, he had become famous. He had a handsome face like a young man. His black hair fell behind his head and he held a long and narrow blade in his arms. However, the blade was wrapped in a large amount of black cloth, preventing people from seeing the true appearance of the blade. It was obvious that the blade was the legendary demon blade Muramasa. Mr. Muramasa Haoyue, you're only 30 years old this year. Sword God Yi was the second strongest person in Xia country 100 years ago. Do you really think you can defeat Sword God Yi? A reporter asked a sensitive question directly. Tortoise has lived for a long time, but do you think he's a match for me? Muramasa Haoyue spoke in fluent Chinese. Although his voice was calm, the meaning behind his words immediately caused an uproar among a large number of reporters. They aimed their cameras at him and broadcasted his speech to the various major television stations. The sky was clear and white clouds floated in the sky. Yi Xian looked out of the window with his eyes drifting. He was in a daze. After leaving Jingdu Airport today, he might never see his family again. This was his choice, but it also made him feel regretful. The only thing that comforted Yi Xian was that his mother had a son and a daughter by her side. This was not the worst outcome. Yi Xian held a glass of red wine and took a few sips from time to time. He frowned slightly and put the wine aside. Clearly, he was not used to drinking such a famous Western wine. Jiangnan Airport. Hundreds of luxurious cars were parked there. Thousands of men in black lined up in a row. Ordinary people were separated by yellow lines and were not allowed to step into the yellow lines. Fully armed and heavily guarded, there were a large number of patrolling soldiers with rifles patrolling around the airport. It looked like a big shot was coming to Jiangnan City, which was why such a scene appeared. The people of Jiangnan City were talking about it and watching from a distance. Everyone was surprised because they had never seen such a scene. Even a fool could see that a big shot was coming to Jiangnan City in a while. In the Jiangnan airport, Zhuo Junting was wearing a long black dress. The three teams of the Mansion of the Dead were all dressed in black. Thousands of bodyguards in black stood tall and straight like pine trees. Every one of them looked solemn and respectful. He's here, Zhuo Junting said in a low voice. In the distant sky, a plane was slowly descending toward Jiangnan Airport with a loud whistle. As the private plane came to a stop, the cabin door opened quickly. A slender figure appeared in Zhuo Junting's eyes. Welcome back to Jiangnan, Mr. Yi. Zhuo Junting bowed. The thousands of bodyguards in black behind her bowed as well. They even shouted Yi Xian's name loudly, deafening the entire airport. Chapter 153. Looking at the scene before him, Yi Xian was slightly startled. He didn't expect Zhuo Junting to set up such a grand ceremony to welcome him. It was obvious that his return to Jiangnan was extremely important to this woman. Junting, thank you for your hard work. Yi Xian nodded slowly. This is what I should do. Zhuo Junting said respectfully, not daring to be complacent. A luxurious car drove over. Zhuo Junting opened the door and invited Yi Xian in. Then, a large number of black cars cleared the way. Yi Xian and his group slowly left the airport. However, the people near the airport were all guessing Yi Xian's identity. Qingyun Villa. This was a super villa. Whether you could imagine it or not, this super villa had everything you could wish for. This super villa took a full year to build and was personally supervised by Zhuo Junting. No one knew who the owner of this villa was. This made the outside world speculate why Zhuo Junting, who was known as the poisonous Rakshasa, would spend such a huge amount of money to build such a luxurious villa. Today, Qingyun Villa welcomed its true owner. Accompanied by Zhuo Junting and the rest, Yi Xian took a brief tour of Qingyun Villa. This made him nod his head in satisfaction. Whether it was the modern facilities or the layout of the house, Qingyun Villa could be said to be perfect. From this, it could be seen how much importance Zhuo Junting placed on Yi Xian. In the living room, Yi Xian leaned lazily on the soft sofa. Zhuo Junting and the rest bowed to his left and right. Zhuo Junting pushed a document in front of Yi Xian and said with a slightly ashamed expression, "Mr. Yi, this is the distribution map of the strange beasts that appeared in various parts of the Xia kingdom. Most importantly, there is an extremely mysterious force that is rising in the northwest region. However, Junting is incompetent and didn't find any useful clues." Casually flipping open the document, Yi Xian flipped through it gently. After a full 10 minutes, Yi Xian closed the document and looked at Zhuo Junting. "You did well. You also completed the task I gave you very well. Lord Ming, this is all the information on the Moor group." After a year of cultivation, Viper, the team leader of the Dark Knight, had already stepped into Xiantian Realm Level 9. He respectfully passed a document to Yi Xian and stood with his hands by his side. Yi Xian flipped open the document and read it slowly. A cold smile appeared on his face as he said, "Sword Saint Sith. Do you want to avenge that trash, Ba Dao? And the Moor Corporation even spent tens of billions to place a bounty on my head? Mantu. Your subordinate is here." Steamed Bun knelt on one knee with a silly smile on his face, but he was waiting for Yi Xian's orders. "Lead the Blood Fiend group and destroy the Moor Corporation. As for this Sword Saint Sith, have her entire family accompany her to hell." Yi Xian casually tossed the document to Mantu, causing him to laugh foolishly and say, "This subordinate obeys." If one were to talk about who was the most bloodthirsty of the underworld's 4 great leaders, Steamed Bun would definitely be the one. Don't be fooled by the fact that Steamed Bun was always smiling foolishly. Steamed Bun was the most suitable person to deal with such matters. After Manta left, the other 2 team leaders reported on the situation over the past year. After half a day, Yi Xian continuously issued various orders to get the mansion of the dead up and running. Zhuo Junting also made it clear to Yi Xian that she had already unified the underground forces in Jiangnan and was waiting for Yi Xian's orders at any time. The meeting ended. Everyone had a simple meal and then went their separate ways. Other than Zhuo Junting, who stayed in the Green Cloud Villa, Fatso Huang brought Gu Beichen to carry out some tasks that Yi Xian had assigned to him. The sun set and night fell. Yi Xian placed his hands behind his back and looked at the moon outside. His eyes were drifting, and no one knew what he was thinking. "Sir, you should rest." Zhuo Junting's voice was soft and gentle with a hint of charm. Zhuo Junting was wearing a transparent pink veil covering her body, and her slender figure was faintly discernible under the veil. She was emitting an extremely seductive charm. Yi Xian snapped out of his thoughts. When he turned around and saw Zhuo Junting's attire, he frowned slightly. Apparently, he had already seen through her intentions. "Junting, you're my subordinate. There's no need to do this. You can go back and rest," Yi Xian said softly. Junting knows that Sir doesn't like Junting, but the ancients say that food and sex are part of human nature. "Sir, you're a man after all, and Junting is still a virgin. I'm willing to give my body to you. Please accept my blessings first." Zhuo Junting bit her lips and said. Yi Xian shook his head slowly. He was not moved by the beauty in front of him. Instead, he waved his hand and said, "My heart isn't here at all. Go do what you need to do." After saying that, Yi Xian turned around and returned to the house, leaving Zhuo Junting alone. She was slightly disappointed, but she had no choice but to put on her clothes and leave the Green Cloud Villa. In the house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged. A helpless smile appeared on his face. It was not that Yi Xian was not lustful. He was a man after all. It was just that he did not have any feelings for Zhuo Junting. Even if he wanted her body, it was just to vent his male desires. Yi Xian naturally wouldn't do something like this that was purely to vent his desires. After all, his mental fortitude was extremely terrifying. Sitting cross-legged, a misty blood light bloomed around him. Yi Xian quietly entered a state of cultivation. At the same time, the duel between the Japanese warrior Muramasa Haoyue and the nation protector sword god Yi Lingtian also took place in Kyoto. The whole world was watching. All the major forces were present. This was because this was a battle between two top warriors. It would definitely be recorded in the annals of human history. Everyone wanted to witness this scene personally. Under the anticipation of everyone, the two top warriors signed a life and death contract. When the battle began, everyone was shocked. This was because the battle was unimaginably fast. One slash. It was just one slash. When Muramasa Haoyue revealed his demon blade, the monstrous black blade beam released a ghostly hull. Yi Lingtian could not even block a single slash. The divine sword that had accompanied him for 100 years also turned into cold stars that filled the sky. Yi Lingtian was defeated. It was a crushing defeat. A crushing defeat. This crushing defeat was broadcasted live by various television stations. It made the people of the Xia kingdom even more speechless. The Century Protector Sword God, a martial arts expert that stood at the peak of the Xia kingdom, had actually been defeated by a young man like Muramasa Haoyue. The world was in an uproar. The people of the Xia kingdom could not accept this fact. However, they saw from the live broadcast that Yi Lingtian's divine sword had shattered and his chest was stained with blood. He had indeed been defeated by Muramasa Haoyue. This is your nation protector sword god? He was no match for one slash of mine. In my opinion, why don't you give me the title of nation protector sword god? From now on, I, Muramasa Haoyue, will protect the Xia kingdom. In the arena, Muramasa Haoyue smiled contemptuously. His words made the people of the Xia kingdom extremely angry. However, none of the warriors present went up. After all, even Yi Lingtian had been defeated. How could they be a match for Muramasa Haoyue? Chapter 154. Kill me if you can. Yi Lingtian was the second most powerful man in the world 100 years ago, known as the Lingtian sword god and revered by the world. However, such a person was defeated by a foreign junior. This made Yi Lingtian feel extremely ashamed. You've already lost to me. You don't deserve to die under Muramasa's demon blade. Get lost. Muramasa Haoyue smiled disdainfully. Then, he looked at the warriors of Xia and said, even your sword god has been defeated by me. From now on, I, Muramasa Haoyue, will be the leader of the ancient martial arts world in Xia. I don't think anyone has any objections, right? So what if you've defeated Yi Lingtian? Xia still has Mr. Yi Xian, Taoist Su Changsen, and Buddhist Mok Kasayapa. You're just a warrior from a small country. How dare you speak so arrogantly, a warrior retorted loudly. That's right. Putting aside the fact that Buddhism and Taoism have a long history and are the mainstays of Xia, Mr. Yi Xian has repelled the beast tide. With his unparalleled cultivation, killing you is as easy as killing a chicken, another warrior roared. Yi Xian. Muramasa Haoyue murmured. Then, he smiled disdainfully and said, I've heard of this person. He's younger than me, but his cultivation is indeed extraordinary. At this point, Muramasa Haoyue smiled coldly at the cameras of all the major television stations and continued, but so what? Amir Yi Xian is no match for me. Today, I've come to Xia to tell all of you that I, Muramasa Haoyue, will be the #1 expert of the East. If Yi Xian refuses to accept it, he can come and challenge me. When this scene was broadcast live on television to the people of Xia, it immediately caused a lot of anger. The warriors present were flushed. They did not expect Muramasa Haoyue to be so ambitious. Not only did he defeat and humiliate Yi Lingtian, but he also wanted the title of the #1 expert of the East. What was the #1 expert of the East? The #1 expert of the East was the supreme martial artist of the East. No one could defeat him. Ha, with just you. A woman strolled into the arena and looked at Muramasa Haoyue with disgust. Ling Long, get down quickly. You are not his match. There was blood at the corner of Yi Lingtian's mouth, but when he saw Exquisite enter the arena, he still cried out in alarm. He was afraid that Exquisite would be killed by Muramasa Haoyue. Who are you? Do you want to challenge me too? Muramasa Haoyue's eyes lit up as he looked at her. Exquisite, childish face and huge breasts. A strong desire appeared in his eyes. I admit that I'm no match for you, but you slandered my master. I won't allow you to spout nonsense here, Ling Long said sternly. Who is your husband? Yi Xian. As the two of them exchanged questions and answers, cries of surprise could be heard from below the stage. This was because even though Yi Xian's battle records were few, he had never been defeated. Everyone knew just how powerful Yi Xian's cultivation was. Yi Xian. At the mention of this name again, Muramasa Haoyue narrowed his eyes and sized up Ling Long. He said, I like you very much. Why don't you and I make a bet? If I defeat Yi Xian, you will become my woman. How about that? With just you. You are still no match for my master. But let me remind you, if you really go to my master, I'm afraid you will die without a burial ground, Ling Long sneered. You are an interesting woman. It seems that you are very confident in him. But this is good. When I defeat him, you will know who is the real strong one, Muramasa Haoyue said with narrowed eyes. A duel between two top cultivators ended with a strong start and a weak finish. It also showed the world how terrifying Muramasa Haoyue was. However, this wasn't the end. Under the anticipation of everyone, Muramasa Haoyue left the capital and headed in the direction of Jiangnan City. He even let out word to the outside world that the so-called Yi Xian wasn't his match at all. Jingdu First Hospital. Yi Lingtian's face was pale. The knife wound on his chest was extremely terrifying. A large number of doctors were treating Yi Lingtian's wound. Azure Dragon and Ling Long stood beside him, their faces pale. Ling Long, is Yi Xian really that strong? Is this the reason why you have always refused to acknowledge me as your master? Yi Lingtian's face was red as he said in a dissatisfied voice. Hearing Yi Lingtian's dissatisfied words, Ling Long's eyes flickered. She looked in the direction of Jiangnan City and said, Mr. Yi is really strong. You will never know how terrifying he is. This time, Muramasa Haoyue went to challenge him. He will only end up dead. That's right. I believe that Mr. Yi can defeat this person and become the top expert of the East. Azure Dragon nodded slowly. Huh. Suddenly, Yi Lingtian laughed wildly. As he laughed, he actually cried. The top expert of the East? What a joke, what a joke. Yi Lingtian stared at the two of them and said, I admit that I am no match for Muramasa Haoyue. But even if this Yi Xian can defeat this person, it is simply a joke if he wants to become the top expert of the East. Looking at Yi Lingtian's crazed appearance, Azure Dragon and Ling Long were stunned. They did not know why Yi Lingtian would say such a thing. The true top expert of the East does not even bother to set foot in the mortal world. 100 years ago, he had already stepped into the legendary realm of the path of immortality, searching for the method of immortality. Yi Lingtian's face was crazed as he roared, There is no road in heaven and earth, only I, the immortal Jew. These 8 words describe this person's life. He is a god, he is an immortal. Throughout the past 1,000 years, no one has been able to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Who is he? Looking at Yi Lingtian's crazed behavior, Azure Dragon asked in a trembling voice. The Great Oblivion Marshal Juexian. Yi Lingtian roared in a trembling voice. His eyes were filled with crazed worship. Marshal Juexian. Azure Dragon muttered to himself, his body trembling. He had only heard this name from his deceased master, and his expression was exactly the same as Yi Lingtian's at the moment. Azure Dragon still remembered his master's infatuated and crazed worship. Dong! Suddenly, Yi Lingtian staggered off the bed. Under Azure Dragon and Ling Long's horrified gaze, Yi Lingtian pushed open the door of the ward. He was already far away, but his crazed voice could be heard at this moment. My 100 years of fame has been destroyed, but it doesn't matter. As long as Marshal Juexian is alive, no one in the world dares to call themselves the top expert of the East. Qingyun Villa, Jiangnan City. Yi Xian leaned lazily on the sofa, reading an ancient book in his hand. Fatso Huang and Jun Ting stood on either side of him, constantly reporting something to Yi Xian. Yi Ling Tian lost? Yi Xian put down the ancient book and said calmly. Yes, sir. And this Muramasa Haoyue is on his way to Jiangnan. He even said that he would kill you with his sword, Fatso Huang said with a hint of mockery. According to the news from Japan, this Muramasa Haoyue's cultivation has just reached the innate stage. Logically speaking, it's impossible for him to defeat Yi Lingtian, Jun Ting analyzed. Demon Blade Muramasa. Fatso Huang sneered. It's this demon blade that allowed Muramasa Haoyue to defeat Yi Lingtian. It wasn't his own strength. That's right. The demon blade Muramasa is one of Japan's divine weapons. Other than the Kusanagi sword that disappeared in history, this Muramasa is definitely not an ordinary weapon in the world, Jun Ting added. I wanted to have 2 days of peace, but someone kept disturbing me. Fatso Huang, I'll leave this person to you. Yi Xian picked up the ancient book again and read it. He didn't care about this so-called Muramasa Haoyue at all. Yes, sir. Fatso Huang laughed sinisterly and turned to leave. Although the demon blade Muramasa was extremely terrifying and was one of Japan's divine weapons, Fatso Huang still believed that this Muramasa Haoyue was no match for him when it came to dirty tricks. Chapter 155. Sir, all the major forces are paying attention to you. Don't you plan to do it yourself? Zhua Junting asked. Yi Xian frowned. There are so many ants in the world. If I have to deal with all of them myself, what use do I have for you? Junting knows she was wrong. Zhua Junting quickly knelt on the ground. She knew she had said something wrong. Get up. Yi Xian's voice was calm as he said, you have to remember that I raised you guys to help me get rid of these ants. Unless there's an enemy that you can't resist, I won't make a move. Junting will remember your teachings, Zhua Junting said gently. Lianyan Mountains. The vast mountains connected the heavens and the earth. The undulating mountain range was like a dragon entrenched in the heavens and the earth. It made people feel small when they looked at it from afar. Yi Lingtian's clothes were tattered as he walked through the forest. His expression was one of madness and unwillingness. He followed the forest path to the peak of Lianyan Mountains. On the peak, there was a cold pond, a cottage, and a grave. There was nothing else. When Yi Lingtian reached the peak, he looked around in a daze, looking for the legendary figure. However, when he saw the grave on the peak, his expression changed drastically. He quickly walked toward the grave. There was a tombstone with the words, Dead Marshal Juexian. Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. Yi Lingtian growled. He could not believe that the person he admired all his life would be buried in a grave. I, Yi Lingtian, am not dead yet. How could Big Brother Juexian be buried in a grave? Yi Lingtian roared hoarsely. He could not believe this. Big Brother Juexian, please come out and meet me. Yi Lingtian looked around and shouted loudly. His voice echoed in the void from all directions. Unfortunately, no matter how Yi Lingtian called, there was no response from the peak of Lianyan Mountains. It was as if this was a graveyard where no living person lived. Big Brother Juexian, everyone will die in this world. However, I believe that you are still alive. Please come out and see me. Yi Lingtian's face was covered in tears. I have nothing to do with the mortal world anymore. Go back to where you came from. Suddenly, a cold and emotionless voice came from all directions. The voice was deep and ancient, as if it had crossed the barrier of time and space and entered Yi Lingtian's ears. Big Brother Juexian, you're still alive. Yi Lingtian roared with a trembling voice. He was extremely excited. Wang! The void swayed, and ripples spread out. A slender figure appeared high in the sky. His body was hazy and illusory, and there was an indescribable light slowly blooming around him. It gave people the feeling that the great Tao was simple. There are 8 sufferings in life: greed, anger and stupidity, resentment and hatred, separation from love, unattainable desires, you have anger and resentment in your heart. You are trapped by your own reputation and have already fallen into the unorthodox path. Why are you doing this? Wu Juexian sighed. Brother Juexian, Yi Lingtian's face was pale and his body was trembling. I understand why you are here. However, I am no longer involved with the mortal world. The matters of the world have nothing to do with me. You may leave. Wu Juexian sat cross-legged in the void, and the sound of martial Dao boomed in his body. Martial Dao thunder, breaking the world? Could it be? Could it be that Big Brother Juexian has finally broken through the shackles of heaven and earth and stepped into the Golden Core realm? Yi Lingtian asked in shock. Those above the Khanate stage were called land immortals. They could live up to 300 years. However, in the eyes of Yi Lingtian and the others, the land immortals were also called the foundation establishment stage. However, they had no spiritual qi to absorb and could only stagnate for the rest of their lives. Above the foundation establishment stage was the Golden Core stage. Wu Juexian had already stepped into this stage 100 years ago. Today, 100 years later, Wu Juexian's body was emitting martial Dao thunder. Could it be that his Golden Core stage was completed? Golden Core stage? Wu Juexian murmured. Then, he slowly shook his head and said, "You are wrong. There is no spiritual qi in this world. How can I truly become an immortal cultivator? However, Wu Juexian, have cultivated for 100 years. Even though there is no spiritual qi in this world and the path to immortality has been cut off, I have walked a path that no one has walked before. My path is to enter the way through martial arts. I only cultivate myself and do not respect heaven and earth." As Wu Juexian's words fell, Yi Lingtian was stunned. Only a genius like Wu Juexian could walk his own path without being bound by heaven and earth. In this world, there was always a small group of people who were born extraordinary. They had great willpower and wisdom. They did not believe in fate and only believed in themselves. Wu Juexian was such a person. Big Brother Juexian, do you still remember? My martial arts cultivation was all taught by you. 100 years ago, you were invincible. No one in this world could defeat you. However, 100 years later, the world has forgotten your name. Are you really willing to accept this? Yi Lingtian asked in a trembling voice. He had no intention of leaving just like that. The world's false reputation is nothing to me. Even that old friend of mine from the West has been hiding in the Sage Palace for 100 years and has not come out. As the saying goes, no one in the mortal world is a match for me. Stepping into the mortal world for the sake of fame is not what I want, Wu Juexian said calmly. A hairpin appeared in Yi Lingtian's hand. He tossed it to Wu Juexian. Yi Lingtian trembled and said, "Big Brother Juexian, do you still remember this hairpin?" The hairpin was already yellowed. It was no more than an ordinary item, but it caused Wu Juexian's breathing to stop. That was because the hairpin in his hand was something he had personally given to a woman in the past. That woman was Yi Lingtian's older sister, and also his wife. Back then, in order to pursue the martial arts of the Tongtian, you cut off your family and your 6 desires. My sister died in grief. Do you still remember her? Yi Lingtian asked in a trembling voice. Wu Juexian's body trembled slightly, and the air around him exploded. He stared at the hairpin in his hand and then slowly closed his eyes. He said, "Yi Lingtian, are you forcing me to come out of hiding?" "That's right, I'm forcing you, but I've never hated you, because you're the one who brought me onto this path of martial arts. You're the only family I have in this world. But I can't accept this. I can't accept being trampled under the feet of some younger generation. I want the world to know that even if I, Yi Lingtian, am defeated, my big brother, my sister's husband, is still the world's #1 expert. He's the domineering martial Juexian. He is also the man who dared to shout 100 years ago that there is no road in the world, only I am Juexian." Yi Lingtian screamed. His voice was filled with resentment and anger, and it made the air around him rumble, proving how emotional he was. Wu Juexian sat cross-legged in the air, silently watching Yi Lingtian. He breathed in slowly and exhaled slowly. He held the hairpin tightly in his hand, and a touch of sadness flashed across his eyes. Xian I owe you so much in my life. Today, your brother is begging me with this hairpin. What do you want me to do? Wu Juexian murmured. After a dozen breaths of time, he stood up in the air and walked slowly toward Yi Lingtian. He said in a cold voice, Yi Lingtian, since you insist on forcing me, I will fulfill your wish. But from now on, there will be no more separation between us. If you come looking for me again, there will be such a mountain. Rumble. Wu Juexian turned his palm into a saber. When he slashed out, a 1,000-foot-long saber light tore through space and cut a mountain in half. The broken mountain fell into the valley and let out a deafening boom. The horrifying scene left Yi Lingtian rooted to the ground, unable to regain his senses for a long time. Chapter 156. Jiangnan City was only a first-tier city in Xia country. Naturally, it couldn't be compared to big cities like Kyoto and Shanghai. However, Jiangnan City had suddenly become lively in the past few days. Ancient martial artists, adepts, and even Taoists and Buddhists came to Jiangnan City one after another. Furthermore, the reporters from the various television stations came one after another. They all wanted to see what would happen if Muramasa Haoyue came to challenge Yi Xian. The streets were empty and the crowd was in a frenzy. This battle had attracted the attention of the people of Xia country. This was because the national guardian sword god Yi Lingtian had been defeated by the Japanese. This was something that the people of Xia country could not accept. Muramasa Haoyue was dressed in a Japanese samurai uniform. He was accompanied by 2 servants as he walked towards Qingyun Lodge. Behind him, tens of thousands of people were following quickly. Among these people, there were Khanate stage warriors and even S-class ability users. There were important figures from various factions, famous people from the 3 worlds of the military, politics, and business, as well as ordinary people of Xia country. Naturally, there were also reporters from major television stations. There were all kinds of people from all walks of life. This battle affected the hearts of everyone in Xia country. This was because this was a battle of dignity for Xia country. If they lost to a warrior from a small country, how could Xia country establish itself in the world? Muramasa Haoyue smiled, but his smile was filled with disdain. He wanted to kill Yi Xian in front of everyone in Xia country. He wanted to let these stupid people know who was the top expert in the East. In front of Qingyun Lodge, Fatso Huang and Gu Beichen stood side by side. The 2 death gods' personal guards stood on both sides of the door. When the sound of heavy footsteps came from afar, Fatso Huang's lips curled into a sinister smile. He whispered to Gu Beichen, "Beichen, watch carefully. Watch how I kill this trash." Ha! Gu Beichen sneered. Fatso Huang, the opponent's weapon is the demon blade Muramasa. Even Yi Lingtian was defeated by him. Although you're despicable and scheming, I'd like to see how you'll explain to Mr. Yi if you fail. Ha, he's just a mere Japanese pirate. Killing him is as easy as flipping my hand. Fatso Huang said savagely. While the 2 were talking, Muramasa Haoyue had already arrived in front of the Clear Sky Villa. It was also at this time that the reporters from various major TV stations took photos. All kinds of flashes were extremely dazzling, and there were even noises coming from the crowd. My master, Muramasa Haoyue, has come today to challenge Mr. Yi Xian. This is my master's letter of challenge. Mr. Yi Xian, please come out and fight. One of the servants had an arrogant look on his face as he threw the golden invitation at Fatty Huang. After receiving the letter of challenge, Fatso Huang smiled slightly. Under the cameras of major TV stations, he tore up the letter of challenge and threw it on the ground. This also made Haoyue Muramasa's face change slightly. He looked at Fatso Huang with a cold murderous look. How could a mere woka be worthy of my master's attention? Hua! Following Fatso Huang's words, an uproar came from the crowd. Everyone's faces were filled with surprise. Could it be that this Mr. Yi did not intend to accept Muramasa Haoyue's challenge? Yi Xian is only a so-so. It seems that he is just a person with an undeserved reputation. Muramasa Haoyue walked forward with large strides, the aura around his body was extremely cold. He even turned around and sneered at the many people of China. The dignified China actually has no one who is my match. Since this Yi Xian refuses to fight, then I'll personally tear down his clear sky pavilion and kill him under my blade. I'll let you foolish people of China experience the power of my Japanese martial artists. Humiliation, undisguised humiliation. When Muramasa Haoyue said these words, not only the people of China present, but even the people of China sitting in front of the TV, everyone's faces flushed red as anger rose in their hearts. Friend, please come out and fight, Mr. Yi. That's right. If even Mr. Yi avoids the battle, wouldn't all the countries in the world mock China for having no one? Mr. Yi, please fight. The crowd's emotions surged like waves. All sorts of pleading voices could be heard, and this also made Muramasa Haoyue sneer. He looked at Fatso Huang with an extremely mocking gaze. Everyone, please be quiet. Don't disturb my master's afternoon nap. Fatso Huang's expression turned cold. He knew very well that Yi Xian was currently taking a nap. If he couldn't even handle such a small matter, wouldn't he be blamed by Yi Xian? Afternoon nap. This. A surprised voice came from the crowd. No one expected that Mr. Yi would still be taking a nap at such a critical moment. You're just putting on an act. Let me tear down your clear sky villa and see where this coward is hiding. Muramasa Haoyue said coldly. When he took a step forward, he suddenly appeared in front of the door. His surroundings were filled with violent aura. It was obvious that he was about to smash the door and force his way in. Little pirate, you're courting death. The corner of Fatso Huang's mouth curled into a sinister smile. A bloody light spread out from his body. His fleshy palms strangely turned into a pale green color, and a stench filled the air. Corpse poison palm. Fatso Huang suddenly slammed his palm towards Muramasa Haoyue. The terrifying absolute poison astral wind instantly enveloped this person, causing Muramasa Haoyue's expression to change greatly. His footsteps violently retreated. With a light flick of his sleeve, a gust of astral wind appeared, blowing the absolute poison astral wind that enveloped him into the distance. Sizzle! A terrifying scene appeared. 100-year-old tree in the distance was infected by the absolute poison astral wind. The tree instantly withered, and the green leaves turned yellow. In just a few breaths of time, under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the 100-year-old tree turned into a pile of wood dregs. The terrifying scene was extremely shocking. What a sinister palm technique! The corner of Muramasa Haoyue's mouth twitched. A chill rose from the bottom of his heart. If he hadn't retreated quickly, he would have definitely suffered a great loss from this sinister palm technique. At this moment, Muramasa Haoyue's arrogance was no longer there. He finally looked at Fatso Huang seriously. He slowly raised the Muramasa demon blade in his hand. His eyes were filled with terrifying killing intent as he looked at Fatso Huang. To be able to cultivate such a sinister palm technique, it seems that you are not a kind person. You are qualified to die under the Muramasa demon blade. The black cloth wrapped around the demonic blade slowly unraveled, and a dark, cold light slowly bloomed, causing the faint howls of ghosts to resound from all directions, causing everyone present to feel a chill run down their spines. Be careful, this Muramasa demon blade is extremely evil. Sword God Yi was defeated by this blade. A Khanate realm warrior loudly reminded Fatso Huang, afraid that Fatso Huang didn't know the power of this blade. Muramasa demon blade? I'm afraid you can't use this blade, right? Fatso Huang smiled sinisterly. A smug look appeared in his eyes. At this moment, he suddenly attacked. A pair of pale green palms violently slammed towards Muramasa Haoyue. You are courting death. Muramasa Haoyue said coldly. He held the demon blade with both hands and suddenly raised it. It was as if he would kill Fatso Huang in the next moment. Chapter 157. Poof! Suddenly, without waiting for Muramasa Haoyue to slash out, his face suddenly turned pale green. A large amount of black blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. The Muramasa demon blade in his hand fell to the ground at that moment. Die! Bang! Fatso Huang smiled cruelly. His corpse poison palm suddenly slammed into Muramasa Haoyue's chest, knocking him to the ground. Muramasa Haoyue did not even have the strength to fight back. Such a scene completely stunned everyone present. No one expected that such a terrifying Muramasa Haoyue would be defeated by a nobody. Furthermore, this person was only Yi Xian's servant. Silence. Silence. Dead silence. Tens of thousands of citizens of the Great Xia were dead silent at that moment. It took a full 10 breaths of time before they let out a cheer. At that moment, Muramasa Haoyue's mouth could not stop bleeding. His forehead was covered in cold sweat. He looked at Fatso Huang with eyes full of anger. You are so despicable. You actually poisoned me. Muramasa Haoyue roared. What a joke. What a joke. I am despicable and shameless, but you are no different from me. Don't forget that you were able to defeat Yiling Tian because of this Muramasa demon blade. Since you can rely on external objects to win, why can't I rely on poison to kill you? Fatso Huang sneered. As Fatso Huang's words fell, Muramasa Haoyue's face turned ashen. He wanted to refute loudly, but he did not know what to say when the words reached his mouth. Fine, fine, fine. Today, I, Muramasa Haoyue, admit defeat. However, you have to let me know why I lost. When did you poison me? Why didn't I feel anything at all? Muramasa Haoyue roared loudly. Clearly, he did not know why he had lost. Go to the King of Hell and ask for an answer. Fatso Huang walked over slowly. The smile on his face was extremely ferocious. Clearly, he did not intend to let Muramasa Haoyue's life go. This made Muramasa Haoyue's expression change drastically. He said, I have already admitted defeat. Do you still want to kill me? You're really stupid. Fatso Huang had already arrived in front of Haoyue Muramasa. He looked down at him and said, I never said that I was competing with you in martial arts. Since you dare to provoke my master, you should be prepared to die. Die! Under Muramasa Haoyue's horrified and desperate gaze, Fatso Huang chopped out with a karate chop, directly cutting off Muramasa Haoyue's head to the ground. The bleak and terrifying blood soaked the ground, making it look extremely terrifying. Cruel, sinister, ruthless, and merciless. This was the attitude that Fatso Huang displayed in front of everyone. It also allowed everyone to truly understand Fatso Huang at this moment. Some people were so frightened that their legs were trembling. Picking up the Muramasa demon's blade, Fatso Huang looked around at everyone present. Then, he smiled and said, My master will not see any guests. I also hope that everyone will not come to disturb him in the future. Please leave. After saying this, Fatso Huang took the Muramasa demon's blade and strode towards the Qingyun villa. Muramasa Haoyue's 2 servants were already scared out of their wits. It was only when they saw the Muramasa demon's blade in Fatso Huang's hands that the 2 of them quickly regained their senses. Wait, the Muramasa demon's blade is one of the divine protector weapons of Japan. Sir, please return it to us. One of the servants said with a trembling voice. Ha, if you want to die, you can take back this blade. Fatso Huang turned around and smiled sinisterly. Immediately, the 2 servants' faces turned pale. After a moment of hesitation, they put away Muramasa Haoyue's corpse and quickly fled the place. At this moment, Over 10,000 citizens of Xia country watched this scene in a daze. They never thought that Muramasa Haoyue would die in the hands of Yi Xian's servant. Moreover, even Japan's divine protector weapon, the Muramasa Demon's Blade, was taken away by Yi Xian's servant. What a powerful fatso! Who exactly is he? I've seen this person once in the Wuanan agency. Back then, I only thought that he was an ordinary member. Now, it seems that he's a peerless expert. Bullshit. He clearly addressed Yi Xian as Sir and has always regarded himself as a servant. In my opinion, this Mr. Yi is the most terrifying existence. All sorts of discussions were heard and the crowd gradually dispersed. However, Muramasa Haoyue's death made the citizens of Xia country very excited. In the Qingyun villa, Fatso Huang held the Muramasa Demon's Blade and bowed below Yi Xian with a face full of smiles. On the other hand, Gu Beichen looked puzzled as he stared at Fatso Huang. Until now, he still did not understand why Muramasa Haoyue would be poisoned and unable to use the Muramasa Demon's Blade. Sir, Muramasa Haoyue has been killed by me on the spot. This is the Muramasa Demon's Blade. Please take a look. Fatso Huang's attitude was humble as he handed the Muramasa Demon's Blade to Yi Xian with both hands. You did well. I really didn't misjudge you. Yi Xian took the blade casually and narrowed his eyes. A trace of doubt flashed across his eyes and then disappeared quietly. Fatso Huang, you've been with me all day. When did you poison Muramasa Haoyue? Gu Beichen finally could not hold back the doubts in his heart and asked Fatso Huang. Fatso Huang smiled and said, actually, this is all thanks to the Dark Knight group. If not for Viper giving me enough information, I wouldn't have been able to kill Muramasa Haoyue. What information? Gu Beichen asked. Let me tell you. Viper walked forward and smiled. When Muramasa Haoyue sent out the news of challenging Sir, Fatso Huang asked me to help him investigate this person's habits. After a few days of investigation, the Dark Knight group had thoroughly investigated this person's habits and preferences. Even if he went to the toilet a few times a day, it was all recorded in the documents. Fatso Huang smiled and said, through the documents that Viper gave me, I discovered something very interesting. Muramasa Haoyue likes to eat raw sashimi called blood zebra fish. Before I followed Mr. Yi, I was a doctor. I don't dare to say that I'm proficient in the art of medicine, but I still know a thing or two about this type of blood zebra fish. This blood zebra fish's meat is delicious and it's indeed not poisonous. However, if it's paired with blue grass, it's a type of poison in the world. As Fatso Huang said this, he looked at Gu Beichen and said, blue grass is extremely precious, but it's extremely easy for the underworld to find it. A few days ago, I transplanted a large amount of blue grass in front of Qingyun Villa. Muramasa Haoyue had eaten sashimi of the blood zebra fish on that day. When he smelled the fragrance of the blue grass, it had already triggered the poison. As Fatso Huang explained everything, Gu Beichen suddenly understood. He looked at Fatso Huang with a look of admiration. He finally understood why Yi Xian asked him to follow Fatso Huang. At this moment, Yi Xian smiled. He was very satisfied with the decision to establish the underworld. With Fatso Huang and the rest by his side, he could save a lot of trouble. This was also his original intention for establishing the underworld. Chapter 158. The entire world was in an uproar. The death of Muramasa Haoyue completely caused the diplomatic relationship between Japan and Xia to drop to a freezing point. Japan even sent their foreign affairs minister to ask Xia for the Muramasa demon blade. Unfortunately, Xia's officials were very strong. They directly told the Japanese that the Muramasa demon blade was Yi Xian's spoils of war. Xia had no right to ask Yi Xian to return it to Japan. For a moment, the smoke of war slowly rose between the countries. It seemed like a war would break out if there was a disagreement. However, at this critical moment when the exotic beasts were wreaking havoc all over the world, this war also disappeared without a trace. Yi Xian, a simple name, was known by the entire world. He was even crowned as the #1 expert of the East. He was vaguely at odds with the Golden Paladin of the Vatican City in the West. Although Muramasa Haoyue didn't die at the hands of Yi Xian, just one of Yi Xian's servants had taken his life. This also caused Yi Xian's reputation to reach its peak. But this wasn't the end. When Yi Xian was crowned as the #1 expert of the East, explosive news spread all over the world. It completely caused an uproar among the forces of the world. They even sent messengers to Xia. Wu Juexian. A domineering name. When this name appeared in the ears of the world, ordinary people were puzzled. They didn't know who it was. However, whether it was the East or the West, when some ancient forces heard the name Wu Juexian, their hearts trembled. That was because it was this name that had caused a huge commotion 100 years ago. There was no path in heaven and earth, only Wu Juexian. He didn't respect Buddhism and only cultivated himself. With Tongtian's martial strength, he swept through the entire divine continent. There was no one who could withstand his attacks. He trampled Dongying, defeated Goryeo, and went to the west. Along the way, many experts in the west fell at his feet. It was only when the previous Pope of the Vatican walked out of the Holy Palace that the two of them engaged in a shocking battle. This battle was chaotic. No one knew the final outcome. It was also in this battle that the two top experts in the world disappeared one after another, leaving behind a legend that the world yearned for. Wu Juexian was the #1 fighter of the East, and he had the reputation of being the #1 man in the world. If it were not for the fact that no one knew the outcome of the battle 100 years ago, Wu Juexian would have become the #1 man in the world. Ancient martial artists came to court, mutants came to pay their respects, Jixia Academy, Small Thunder Temple, the ancient clans of the East and West, the emissaries of the Vatican, the Western Witchcraft Alliance, all the major powers in the world rushed towards the Xia Kingdom because Wu Juexian was a legend of his era, and no one had ever broken this legend. He stood at the peak and was invincible. Because Wu Juexian was still alive, who would dare to call themselves the #1 expert of the East? Yi Lingtian issued a challenge to Yi Xian through a global broadcast. If Yi Xian wanted the title of the top fighter of the East, he would have to fight his brother, Wu Juexian, first. If he could win, the title of top fighter of the East would be given to him. The whole world was in an uproar. However, Jiangnan City was extremely quiet. Yi Xian did not respond to the challenge at all. This made Yi Lingtian feel as if he had punched cotton. It gave him a feeling of powerlessness, which made him feel extremely unsatisfied. Yi Xian did not accept the challenge. This was understandable in the eyes of the world, because Wu Juexian was a legend. No matter how strong Yi Xian was, how could he be a match for Wu Juexian? Just as this matter was about to settle down, Fatso Huang released a statement through Jiangnan TV, which completely focused the world's attention on him. In this world, there is no one who can make my master challenge, but if anyone wants to challenge my master, they can pay him a visit in person. When this statement was released, the whole world was in an uproar. Obviously, this statement was too arrogant. It actually made Wu Juexian pay him a visit in person. How could they take Wu Juexian seriously? Capital City. Yi Lingtian's face was gloomy. He stared at Fatso Huang on the TV. Wu Juexian, on the other hand, was wearing a black shirt. His face was expressionless, as if he was not affected by anything. Brother Juexian, I'll have to trouble you to accompany me to Jiangnan, Yi Lingtian looked back and said unwillingly. Yi Lingtian, after this battle, you and I will cut off all ties, Wu Juexian said softly. When he took a step forward, he disappeared in front of Yi Lingtian. Looking at Wu Juexian's back, Yi Lingtian's face flushed red. He murmured, Yi Xian, no matter how strong you are, in front of Wu Juexian, you will know the meaning of despair. A piece of news spread around the world. Wu Juexian had personally gone to Jiangnan to fight Yi Xian. This battle was the first time Wu Juexian had fought in 100 years. The entire Jiangnan city was packed with people, all of whom wanted to witness this battle of the century. Wu Juexian was invincible in the world 100 years ago. He even dared to say that there was no road between heaven and earth, only he was Wu Juexian. Yi Xian was mysterious and unpredictable. No one knew what kind of cultivation he had inherited. In the eyes of the world, he had never been defeated. Both of them were legendary geniuses. This was a battle that spanned 100 years. It was a battle of the century. Who was the strongest in the East would be decided in this battle. Qingyun Pavilion. Yi Xian leaned lazily on the soft sofa. Zhua Junting pressed her hands on Yi Xian's shoulders. Her skillful massage made Yi Xian very satisfied. "Sir, are you really going to fight Wu Juexian?" Fatso Huang asked in a low voice. "Wu Juexian. I've read about him in the ancient files of the Wu An Agency. He is indeed a genius that only appears once in 1,000 years. I hope he won't disappoint me. After all, the world is about to fall. If humans are always so weak, wouldn't it be too boring?" Yi Xian said softly. "Sir, your cultivation is unprecedented. How can a mere Wu Juexian be your opponent?" Fatso Huang said respectfully. Hearing Fatso Huang's words, Yi Xian's face was calm. His eyes were deep as he said, "Fatso Huang, you must always remember that this world does not lack geniuses. In every era, there are always a few people who are admired by the world. For Wu Juexian to be so respected by the world, he must have his own strengths." As Yi Xian said this, he got up from the sofa. His eyes were as deep as an ancient pool. He looked into the distant sky and said, "I just received an opportunity, and my level of life has surpassed that of mortals. However, I still believe that on the path of cultivation, I must tread on thin ice. I must not underestimate anyone. Only then can I take one step at a time and reach the top of the 9 heavens." On the 7th day of the 7th month, the sun shone brightly in the sky. A black figure strolled through the air towards the azure cloud courtyard. With each step he took, the surrounding space rumbled as if the world was twisting. It made people feel extremely pressured just by looking at him. Wu Juexian stood proudly in the void, looking down at the azure cloud villa. His face was very calm, so calm that there was not the slightest ripple. His voice was old and hoarse. "I originally did not want to be tainted by the world of mortals. However, I owed someone in the past. Today, I have come here to fight with you. It can be considered as repaying the karma of the past. Brother, please grant me my wish." Wu Juexian did not take advantage of his seniority, nor did he have the bearing of a senior. He spoke as if they were of the same generation because his heart was not here. He did not care about how the world looked at him. He only wanted to leave the world after this battle. Chapter 159. There was a sea of people, but it was silent. Whether it was the envoys of the world's major forces or the TV reporters who were broadcasting this battle of the century, they were all silent at this moment. They looked at Wu Juexian from the ground. Everyone's breathing was heavy, and their eyes were filled with deep reverence. When a person reached the peak, he did not need to put on airs or speak big words. He simply stood high in the sky, as if he was the only one in the world. A millennium talent, unparalleled and unparalleled. Wu Juexian was the brightest star of an era. Inside the azure cloud pavilion, Fatso Huang's face was gloomy. He directly gave the 3 team leaders of the underworld a look. Obviously, the arrival of Wu Juexian made Fatso Huang want to join forces with the 3 team leaders to attack Wu Juexian together. "Stand down. You are not his match." Suddenly, Yi Xian's face was calm, but his eyes were shining. It was a strange light, as if he had discovered something extremely new. Dong! Yi Xian took a step forward and suddenly disappeared from the azure cloud pavilion. When he reappeared, he was already high in the sky, facing Wu Juexian. Yi Xian has come out. This is a true battle of the century. It is enough to be recorded in the history of mankind. Let's wait and see who is the top expert of the East. A large number of discussions could be heard from the crowd on the ground. Everyone was watching with rapt attention, not daring to be distracted in the slightest. They wanted to witness this unprecedented battle. High in the sky, in the void, Yi Xian placed his hands behind his back as a cool breeze blew over, causing his jet-black hair to flutter in the wind. There was not the slightest bit of aura around him, and the gaze he used to look at Wu Juexian was extremely calm. Wu Juexian stood in the void, carefully sizing up this junior. A smile appeared on his face. "You are very strong. You are not bad either." The two of them looked at each other and smiled. Everything was said without words, and there was a faint feeling of appreciation. In fact, the two of them were very similar. They were the same kind of people. They did not respect the heavens and the earth and only cultivated themselves. They believed that their fate was in their own hands and not the heavens. The world has changed, and time has changed. I thought that I was invincible in my generation. I thought that I was invincible. But now that I've met Brother Yi, I realize that there is someone like Brother Yi in this world. Even if Wu Juexian were to die here today, I would have no regrets in my life, Wu Juexian said with a smile. At the end of the world, spiritual energy no longer exists. Brother Wu was able to rely on himself to break through the limits of ancient martial arts and walk a path that no one before him has walked. This Yi is extremely impressed. Yi Xian slowly nodded. His eyes were filled with admiration, and his voice was extremely sincere. Although the two did not reveal any of their auras, they could sense that the other had taken a path that no one had taken before. The only difference was that Wu Juexian viewed Yi Xian as his greatest enemy. He could not see through Yi Xian's cultivation, and Yi Xian gave him an even greater sense of pressure. Wu Juexian had never felt such a feeling in his life, but it made his originally calm blood boil. "Brother Yi, can we fight in the sky?" Wu Juexian waved his sleeves, causing the wind to blow. His voice reverberated in all directions. "Please." Yi Xian smiled casually. When he took a step forward, his entire body soared into the sky. Boom, boom, boom. The clouds surged, and the wind howled. Wu Juexian turned into a ray of light and chased after Yi Xian. The two of them disappeared from the eyes of the world. This. Quick, activate the satellite tracking system and find out where the two of them went. All sorts of noises could be heard from the crowd. All the satellites in the world were activated, and in a few breaths, the two of them appeared clearly again. Above the sky, in the void, Wu Juexian's body was glowing. This was the light of martial arts. It was as if it could pierce through the heavens and the earth. His clothes were flapping, and his black hair danced in the wind. "I have a fist that can split mountains, overturn seas, and overturn the sky. This fist is called heaven breaking. Brother Yi, please teach me." Wu Juexian swung his fists, stirring up the endless wind and clouds. The heavens and earth rumbled, and even the void around him was distorted. It was a terrifying sight. God illuminates the sun and moon to set the universe. Demons create chaos in the sea and turn it into mulberry fields. I have a fist that is called the Great Demon. Buzz! Tongtian's black light seemed to have penetrated the past and present. Endless sounds of slaughter rang out in all directions, and the sound of demons dancing could be heard. When Yi Xian swung his fists, the demonic light that pierced through the sky bloomed on his fists. Fight! Kill! Like a meteor streaking across the sky, the void collapsed under the two's earth-shattering roars. Endless fists blasted out violently, like a meteor shower streaking across the sky. Bang bang bang! The sky shook, and the void exploded. Endless wind and clouds turned into water vapor. A great battle of the century had begun, and the two of them attacked each other violently. Sky Splitter Blade. Wu Juexian turned his palm into a blade, and a 1,000-foot-long blade light cut across the sky, but Yi Xian dodged it. However, the 1,000-foot-long blade light fell and turned a mountain into dust. Sword, come! Clang clang clang! Sword chi buzzed incessantly. Yi Xian turned his finger into a sword, and a 1,000-foot-long blade light condensed in the void and slashed violently toward Wu Juexian. However, Wu Juexian perfectly dodged it. However, the 1,000-foot-long blade light cut 100 miles of land in half. Its terrifying power was simply unimaginable. Through the satellite broadcast, everyone in the world watched this great battle of the century. When they saw the terrifying power released by the two of them, everyone's faces were filled with fear. Is this really a power that a human can have? Scary, too scary. I'm afraid that the so-called intercontinental missiles can't hurt them, right? Could they be immortals? Everyone in the world was shocked because the scene created by the two of them was too terrifying. This was not a power that a human should have. The battle in the sky continued for 3 days and 3 nights. During this time, the two of them killed each other, and there was no clear winner. This made the battle even more intense. Bang! Suddenly, the void exploded, and the air blasted out in all directions. The two of them attacked each other again. Wu Juexian's breathing became difficult, and he looked at Yi Xian with a strange gaze. His whole body was trembling. Why? Why are you hiding your cultivation? Wu Juexian roared violently. The terrifying martial arts light shrouded him, and his voice was so loud that it could shatter mountains and rivers. He was angrily questioning Yi Xian. Wu Juexian was a genius that only appeared once in 1,000 years. He had even walked his own path of martial arts. Even the end of the world could not stop him from yearning for the path of immortality. However, it was such a person who was angrily roaring at Yi Xian. After 3 days and 3 nights of battle, Wu Juexian finally realized something that made him extremely angry. That was, Yi Xian had not revealed his true strength at all. This was because no matter how he attacked Yi Xian, he did not cause any damage to Yi Xian. On the other hand, every time Yi Xian attacked him, it was obvious that it was an understatement, and even caused him to suffer heavy injuries. He was afraid that he would be defeated by Yi Xian in a few days. Wu Juexian could accept being defeated, but Yi Xian had hidden his strength. This made him feel extremely humiliated. An uncontrollable anger exploded at this moment. Chapter 160. Looking at Wu Juexian's angry face, Yi Xian stood in the sky. His expression was calm as he said, Wu Juexian, I have to say that you are the first person I admire. In this world, only you are worthy of fighting me. You were able to break through the limits of martial arts and walk your own path. If you were in the era of spiritual qi, you would be a Tongtian hero. However, in this world, there is no spiritual qi. Even if you don't believe in fate, it has limited your path. If I were to reveal my cultivation, it would be an unfair victory. I, Yi Xian, would not do such a thing. When the conversation between the two was heard, the entire world was deathly silent. Although they didn't understand the meaning behind their words, they clearly knew one thing, and that was that Yi Xian hadn't revealed his full strength. I see, Wu Juexian murmured. After 10 breaths of time, a smile appeared on his face. He then looked at Yi Xian and said, Brother Yi Xian, so you have been sealing your cultivation all this time to fight me fairly. Wu Juexian then roared, but I, Wu Juexian, do not want this kind of fairness. Even if I lose to you today, I ask you to fight me with dignity. Yi Xian was slightly stunned as he looked at the powerful battle intent around Wu Juexian. A trace of depth flashed through his eyes as he looked at Wu Juexian. In fact, Yi Xian could have killed him with one move. However, Yi Xian did not want to do so. Wu Juexian was suppressed by the world. To be able to reach this step was already amazing to Yi Xian. Yi Xian asked himself. If he had not obtained the Immortal scripture and spent 4 years in the Blood Sea battlefield, he might not have been Wu Juexian's opponent. This was why Yi Xian had not used his cultivation to defeat him. Yi Xian knew that he could be cruel and ruthless, and he could do anything to achieve his goals. However, this sort of unfair victory was something that Yi Xian's pride would not allow. He wanted to give Wu Juexian a fair fight. Brother Yi, please give it your all. Even if Wu Juexian dies, he will be able to rest in peace. All of a sudden, on the global satellite television broadcast, Wu Juexian bowed to Yi Xian in the air, pleading for Yi Xian to attack with all his might. This was his last shred of dignity. It was also this scene that caused Yi Lingtian, who was lying on the ground, to stare blankly. He knelt on the ground powerlessly, and large amounts of tears flowed out of his eyes. Brother Juexian, I've let you down. At that moment, Yi Lingtian's face was filled with guilt. He was unwilling to be trampled under the feet of the younger generation. He had even forced Wu Juexian to step into the mortal world, but this was the result he had received. If there was one person in the world who understood Wu Juexian the best, other than his own sister, it would be Yi Lingtian. Yi Lingtian had never thought that a proud and unyielding man like Wu Juexian would bow to someone else. Now, this scene had really happened. From this, it could be seen how unwilling and emotional Wu Juexian was. In the sky, Yi Xian closed his eyes slightly, then slowly opened them. A blood-red light flashed in his eyes, and the murderous aura of Tongtian circled around him. The cries of ghosts and gods could be heard from all directions. Dignity? Very well, then I'll fulfill your wish. His voice was like the universe, exploding the sky. When Yi Xian's voice rang out, it also caused Wu Juexian's face to turn red. His whole body was filled with a monstrous desire to fight. He shouted at Yi Xian, "Come and fight! Great Devil Fist! Heaven-defying slash!" It was the same Great Devil Fist, but it shattered the void and exploded the heavens and earth. When Yi Xian's fist was blasted out, the terrifying devilish light covered the sky and covered the earth. Even the satellites were unable to capture this scene. However, in the midst of the monstrous devil light, a blade of light rose against the sky, but it was quickly annihilated by the devil light. Rumble! The heavens and the earth shook and the void collapsed. After a few dozen breaths, the world returned to normal. However, a figure covered in blood was falling from the sky. Brother Juexian. On the ground, Yi Lingtian cried out loudly. He took a step forward and rushed into the sky, flying directly toward Wu Juexian. Yi Lingtian caught Wu Juexian's body in the sky. However, when he saw Wu Juexian's tragic body, tears flowed from his eyes, and he kept apologizing. Large amounts of blood flowed from the corners of Wu Juexian's mouth. His body was cracked, but the smile on his face was like that of a child's. He muttered, "I lost. Yes, I really lost. But the heavens have eyes. The path to immortality is not cut off. So what if Wu Juexian dies?" At that moment, Wu Juexian fainted. Yi Lingtian carried Wu Juexian's battered body and landed on the ground. Buzz! The void shook and ripples spread. Yi Xian stepped down from the sky and quietly appeared in front of Yi Lingtian. He looked at the unconscious Wu Juexian and a thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. Bang! Suddenly, Yi Lingtian knelt on the ground. Tears streamed down his cheeks. He kept kowtowing to Yi Xian and said in a sorrowful voice, "Mr. Yi, please spare my brother's life. If you want to kill him, kill me because I started this war." At this moment, through the live broadcast of the satellite, the entire world was watching this scene. Everyone was nervous and silent because everyone knew that Yi Xian was a god of slaughter. All of his enemies would die without a burial ground. "You can go," Yi Xian said calmly. He looked deeply at the unconscious Wu Juexian, then turned around and returned to the Qingyun hut under everyone's shocked gazes. "Thank you, Mr. Yi, for sparing my life. I kowtow to you." Yi Lingtian did not expect Yi Xian to spare his brother's life. This made him very emotional. He kept kowtowing to Yi Xian's back and quickly left the place with Wu Juexian in his arms. Wu Juexian lost. Yes, he did lose. This is a legend of an era. This is the end of an era. A new legend has been born. Yi Xian is the top expert of the East. The emissaries of the various countries and the warriors of the Xia all sighed at this war of the century. Then, they all left. However, this war of the century would be recorded in the annals of human history. It would leave behind a legend for future generations to look forward to. A waning moon hung in the sky, and stars filled the starry sky. The bright moonlight sprinkled down, illuminating Yi Xian without a speck of dust, as if he was an immortal in a painting. Yi Xian stood alone under the moon with a calm expression. A cool breeze blew over, causing his clothes to slightly rustle. He looked at the bright moon in the sky, and when his eyes opened and closed, they were slightly deep. It was unknown what he was thinking in his heart. At some point, Fatso Huang quietly appeared beside Yi Xian. There was obvious confusion on his face. "Sir, why didn't you kill him?" Chapter 161. A faint smile appeared on Yi Xian's lips. He looked up at the sky and said calmly, "Killing is just a method, and it is also my nature. However, Wu Juexian is different. My cultivation is much higher than his. Today's battle was an unfair victory. If I kill him, my dignity tells me that it is not allowed. Mister, you can't do that. This Wu Juexian is a monstrous genius. Even though he lost the battle with you today, if his cultivation level increases greatly in the future, he will definitely come and fight you again. What if you?" Fatty Huang said anxiously. "Ha!" Yi Xian smiled. However, his smile was mysterious and deep. He turned to look at Fatso Huang and said in a low voice, "In this world, there is no one who is my opponent. Wu Juexian is someone I want to nurture. I want to see how far he can go on the path of martial arts because I am too lonely, so lonely that I have no opponent. However, he has given me a glimmer of hope." Looking at Yi Xian's mysterious smile, Fatso Huang was stunned. In truth, although he had not followed Yi Xian for a long time, he understood Yi Xian's sinister nature very well. However, to what extent Yi Xian's cultivation had reached, this had always been a mystery. He wanted to ask, but he swallowed the words that came out of his mouth. "Furthermore, I have a premonition that in a few days, Wu Juexian will personally come. That's because he knows that only I can help him step onto the Immortal's road to heaven, and he will be of use to me. That's the reason why I didn't kill him." Yi Xian smiled. His voice was extremely certain, which caused Fatso Huang's expression to change greatly. He looked at Yi Xian in a daze. You mean Wu Juexian will join the underworld?" Fatso Huang said in shock. "You will know when the time comes." Yi Xian smiled mysteriously and turned to return to the Azure Cloud Pavilion, leaving Fatso Huang alone in a daze. However, there was an extremely excited look in his eyes. Wu Juexian was a proud man. If Yi Xian did not exist, he would be an unbeatable figure. However, would such a proud person really be willing to submit to Yi Xian? Fatso Huang did not dare to think about it, but he had an extremely strong premonition. This premonition came from his blind worship of Yi Xian. Fatso Huang knew that his master would never do anything he was not confident in. The world was in an uproar. Wu Juexian's defeat was simply shocking. However, it caused Yi Xian's name to spread all over the world. He was truly recognized by the world as the #1 expert in the East. No one could compete with him. It was also at this time that the envoys that Japan had just sent were rushing towards Jiangnan City. The envoys originally wanted to take back the Muramasa demon blade from Yi Xian, but they were quickly recalled by the Japanese emperor. It was obvious that Yi Xian's terror caused the Japanese to be extremely fearful. It was not just the Japanese. The Saintess of Korea was also rushing to the Xia kingdom. She wanted to meet Yi Xian, the #1 expert in the East. There were also messages from major forces all over the world, congratulating Yi Xian on his ascension to the throne of the #1 expert in the East. At the same time, countless ancient martial ability users were stationed in Jiangnan City. Many young talents went to the Qingyun villa every day, wanting to be Yi Xian's disciple. Some of these young talents came from the Xia kingdom, while others came from all over the world. However, without exception, they were all outstanding figures of major forces. They wanted to be Yi Xian's disciple, so that the forces behind them could be branded with Yi Xian's name. These days, Yi Xian was extremely annoyed. It was not until Yi Xian ordered Fatso Huang to kill all the young men and women sent by the major forces that the Qingyun villa welcomed a rare moment of peace. Logically speaking, the deaths of the young geniuses of the various major powers would definitely cause them to fly into a rage and descend into a thunderous rage. However, they knew that the person they were facing was Yi Xian, the #1 expert of the East. They didn't even dare to fart and dejectedly retrieved the corpses of these young geniuses, not daring to disturb Yi Xian's peace. The name of a person, the shadow of a tree, this was Yi Xian's current might, causing the entire world to fear him to the extreme. After all, 100 years ago, Wu Juexian swept through the east and even the west. Even such a terrifying man was defeated by Yi Xian. How could they dare to be impudent to Yi Xian? At the same time, in the emperor's pavilion in Japan, the emperor of Japan sat on his golden throne. Below him were many Japanese warriors kneeling. The atmosphere in this space was extremely stifling. Emperor, the Muramasa demon blade is the most precious treasure of our country. How can it fall into the hands of Yi Xian? That's right. The Kusanagi sword has been missing for a long time. This Muramasa demon blade is extremely important to our country. It is the key to opening the door of the spirit-branded god. If we can't get it back, it will cause great damage to our country. The many courtiers spoke one after another, causing the Emperor of Japan's face to darken. He did not speak for a long time. Emperor, bam! Enough! Suddenly, the Emperor of Japan smashed the jade beside him. He looked at the courtiers with a ferocious expression and said, even Wu Juexian was defeated by him. How do you expect me to get back the Muramasa demon blade? Have you all forgotten? 100 years ago, Wu Juexian stepped into Japan and defeated our samurai one by one. This humiliation has not been washed away until now. Even Wu Juexian was not a match for Yi Xian. Do you all want history to repeat itself? The Emperor of Japan roared furiously. This caused the courtiers to keep quiet out of fear. After dozens of breaths, the Emperor of Japan suppressed his anger. His face darkened and he said, the Muramasa demon blade must not be lost. It is also the key to opening the door of the spirit-branded god. Since we can't do it openly, we'll take it secretly. Men, tell the Muramasa family that no matter what method they use, they must take back the Muramasa demon blade. If they can't complete the task, let everyone in the Muramasa family commit suicide. The Emperor of Japan said gloomily. He also ordered a servant to quickly pass his order to the Muramasa family. At the same time, in the west, in a luxurious manner, the thick smell of blood floated in the air. A large number of corpses lay in a pool of blood. A blonde woman was bathed in blood. She was half kneeling on the ground with a western longsword in her hand. Her eyes were red and tears blurred her vision. Tell me, who are you? What grudge do I have with you that you want to kill my entire family? Sword Saint Sith clenched his silver teeth. The hatred in his eyes seemed to have solidified. He was roaring loudly. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for not understanding the situation. You want to take revenge for that trash Ba Dao. Since you dare to go against my master, you should be prepared to die. The leader of the blood fiends from the underworld, Steamed Bun, held a blood-red longsword in his hand. He was looking coldly at Sword Saint Sith. Behind him were the members of the Blood Fiends group. They had already slaughtered the entire manor. Yi Xian. It's him. Sword Saint Sith's eyes were wide open. He clenched his fists tightly. His eyes were filled with indescribable hatred. Sword Saint Sith, today is the day you die. Go to hell with your family. Steamed Bun smiled cruelly. The blood-red longsword streaked through the air and slashed towards Sword Saint Sith. An extremely bloodthirsty light flashed in Steamed Bun's eyes. Clearly, he was about to complete the mission Yi Xian had given him. He was in a good mood. Suddenly, at this critical moment, a sinister laugh came from the void. A blood-red light enveloped Sword Saint Sith. Under Steamed Bun's shocked gaze, Sword Saint Sith disappeared. Insolence! Who dares to stop the underworld from killing people? Steamed Bun roared. The blood-red longsword in his hand buzzed. He looked around, searching for the mysterious person who had rescued Sword Saint Sith. Kakik! Go back and tell Yi Xian that our battle with him has only just begun. Soon, we will let him know what true despair is. A sinister laugh came from all directions. As this voice went further and further away, Steamed Bun's expression turned extremely gloomy. The evil aura around him became even more terrifying. Chapter 162. Inside the Azure Cloud Pavilion, in an ancient pavilion, there was a stone table and a pot of tea. Yi Xian's expression was indifferent as he tasted the tea in his cup. He felt a sense of ease and contentment. Wu Juexian, a legend of an era, looked at Yi Xian silently with a complicated look in his eyes. Brother Yi, Wu Juexian wanted to say something but stopped. Yi Xian smiled and said, "You want me to teach you the way of immortality? Brother Yi, please help me." Wu Juexian stood up and bowed. His expression was very serious. Yi Xian smiled and looked at Wu Juexian, "Enter the underworld and be my servant for 100 years. Are you willing? Brother Yi, can you change your condition?" Wu Juexian was definitely not an idiot, and was even an extremely intelligent person. He knew that he had a request for Yi Xian today, so the other party would definitely raise a condition. However, this condition was truly difficult for him. Yi Xian shook his head slowly and said in a low voice, "If you are willing to stay in the underworld, you can take a peek at the way of immortality. If you are not willing, then leave." Wu Juexian was obsessed with martial arts all his life for the way of immortality. Now that the opportunity was in front of him, how could he give it up? "I promise you." In just a few breaths, Wu Juexian made his decision. Obviously, he could not refuse the temptation of the way of immortality, nor did he want to refuse. 100 years as a servant seemed like a long time. But to be able to enter the way of immortality, this was a good deal for Wu Juexian. Actually, the so-called immortal cultivation method is completely useless in this world. This jade slip contains the method to refine blood qi. Only by absorbing enough blood qi to replace spirit qi will your path of martial arts be improved qualitatively. A jade scroll was thrown to Wu Juexian, who quickly caught it. His eyes were filled with excitement. "From now on, you are the vice-mansion master of the underworld. If I am not in the underworld, all decisions will be made by you." Yi Xian looked at Wu Juexian silently, then stood up and walked into the house. In the west, in a mysterious place, there was a black palace standing tall. Inside the black palace, there was a blood-red altar, a black flag with a crescent moon, and a matrix. Sword Saint Sith was bathed in blood. She howled in agony within the matrix. The dark, blood-red light enveloped her body, and terrifying fangs appeared in her mouth. "Yi Xian, you killed my entire family. Even if I become a demon from hell, I'll eat your flesh and drink your blood." Sith Sword Saint howled in agony. His ferocious face was enough to make one's soul tremble. A black-robed, violet-gold figure was seated atop a white bone throne. His eyes, which were covered by the violet-gold robe, were glowing with a dark light as he stared at Sword Saint Sith. A voice that was neither male nor female slowly rang out from his mouth. "Azura secret technique, myriad ghost devouring body. When you master this technique, it will be time for you to seek revenge on Yi Xian." On both sides of the hall, tens of thousands of black-robed people were half-kneeling on the ground. A large amount of blood-red light was blooming around them. Even the void was trembling slightly. "Moon Goddess. Like a tsunami, the void shook. Under the shouts of tens of thousands of black-robed people, the person called Moon Goddess stood up from the white bone throne. She looked at the crescent moon in the sky, and the dark light in her eyes burned brighter. It's not far. It's really not far. Give me a little more time and I'll be able to return to my peak. I'll be able to step onto the Tongtian path again and return to the Earth God realm, Moon Goddess muttered. Her eyes, which were covered by the violet gold robe, shone with an unimaginable blood-red light. Jiangnan City, Azure Cloud Compound. Tap, tap, tap. Yi Xian's fingers tapped on the table, making rhythmic sounds. Steamed Bun bowed to one side. He looked extremely ashamed. Obviously, this was the first time he had carried out Yi Xian's mission, and he had failed. This made him unable to face Yi Xian. Please punish me. Steamed Bun knelt down. This is not your fault. Get up, Yi Xian said calmly. Looking at Yi Xian's calm face, Fatso Huang asked, Sir, do you know who saved Sword Saint Sith? Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not answer Fatso Huang's question. A cruel smile appeared on his face, and a blood-red light flashed in his eyes. Tell Wu Juexian to lead the members of the Mansion of the Dead to the west and find out where Sword Saint Sith is, Yi Xian ordered. Yes, sir. Fatso Huang accepted the order and left. All of you, leave as well. After Yi Xian dismissed everyone, he leaned back on the sofa. His face gradually became gloomy because he knew that the remnant souls of the Immortals were finally going to make their move. Interesting. Let me see how much your cultivation has recovered after a year of hibernation. Yi Xian smiled coldly. A murderous intent flashed in his eyes. While Yi Xian was deep in thought, Zhuo Junting quickly walked over and handed an envelope to Yi Xian. Sir, here is a letter for you. Yi Xian frowned. He casually opened the envelope and looked at the contents of the letter. After a dozen breaths of time, Yi Xian's expression gradually became serious. It was unknown what he was thinking. It's her. Yi Xian muttered to himself. Jiangnan City, in an ordinary coffee shop. Xia Qingzhu frowned slightly. She held a spoon and stirred the coffee in her cup in a daze. Beside her, a young girl accompanied her and whispered something to her from time to time. However, the appearance of these two stunning women immediately became a beautiful scenery in the coffee shop. It was unknown how many men were infatuated and were secretly watching the two of them. They even made their girlfriends ruthlessly pinch their boyfriends to express their dissatisfaction in their hearts. Will he really come? The girl asked. Xia Qingzhu bit her lips. Her eyes were confused and she said, This is the memory of him and me. If he still cares about our old relationship, he will definitely come. Suddenly, the door of the coffee shop was pushed open. A slender figure entered the coffee shop and strolled towards Xia Qingzhu. Yi Xian. When Yi Xian appeared in front of her, Xia Qingzhu bit her lips and even her voice trembled slightly. It was calm and silent. Even when Yi Xian sat across from Xia Qingzhu, there was no fluctuation in his eyes when he looked at this woman. It was as if he was looking at a stranger. What can I do for you? Yi Xian asked calmly. 10,000 years in a glance, youth in an instant. It was the same place, the same person. But at this moment, Xia Qingzhu helplessly found that everything had changed. The man in front of her was no longer the young man. The way he looked at her no longer had the love he had in the past. Do you hate me? Xia Qingzhu lowered her eyes and asked. If you just want to catch up with me, I don't think it's necessary, Yi Xian said calmly. Chapter 163. A line of tears flowed from Xia Qingzhu's eyes. She slowly raised her head and looked at Yi Xian. Her voice trembled as she said, I came to find you today to ask you, if I'm willing to leave the Xia family, can we return to the past? Looking at the tears on Xia Qingzhu's face, Yi Xian was stunned. Then, he slowly shook his head and said, once you miss something, you can never go back. If there's nothing else, I'll take my leave first. Hey, what's wrong with you? My sister came all the way here to find you. How can you treat her like this? The girl's face flushed red as she scolded Yi Xian. Who are you? Yi Xian asked calmly as he looked at the girl's unruly appearance. I'm her younger sister. I just want to tell you that my sister is about to marry into Japan. I came this time because I hope you can take her away because she has never forgotten you, the girl said with a red face. Marry into Japan? Yi Xian narrowed his eyes and looked at Xia Qingzhu silently. No one could tell what he was thinking. So you're getting married? Congratulations. Yi Xian's voice was still calm. Xia Qingzhu bitterly smiled as she looked at Yi Xian, who didn't move at all. Her eyes were filled with despair, and at this moment, she trembled as she took out a wedding invitation and handed it over to Yi Xian. Her voice was bitter as she said, 7 days from now is my engagement day. I hope you can personally come and give me your blessings. Okay, I'll definitely be there. Yi Xian took the wedding invitation and walked out of the coffee shop. However, after taking a few steps, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and looked at Xia Qingzhu. He said in a low voice, Don't you want to say something to me? Looking at Yi Xian's calm face, Xia Qingzhu held her breath. Then, she slowly shook her head and did not say anything else. However, a trace of guilt flashed across her eyes. A faint smile appeared on Yi Xian's face. He did not stay any longer. He walked out of the coffee shop and gradually disappeared from Xia Qingzhu's sight. In the coffee shop, Xia Qingzhu's eyes drooped as streams of tears flowed out of her eyes. When she raised her head again, her face was already covered in tears. Yi Xian, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Please don't blame me, it seems that you were right. He is indeed a heartless person. You have done well this time. As long as this matter is completed, we will definitely not treat you unfairly. The young girl's angry face gradually turned gloomy, and her voice was extremely cold. She no longer looked like a young girl. Instead, she looked like a terrifying killer who had experienced the world for a long time. Inside Qingyun Lodge, Yi Xian clasped his hands behind his back as he gazed into the distant sky. His eyes were deep and filled with the vicissitudes of life as he slowly muttered. Xia Qingzhu, I've already given you a chance. It's you who doesn't know how to cherish it. In that case, let me see exactly what you want to do. The eyes were the windows to the soul. No matter how good a person's acting skills were, they would more or less give the game away. Yi Xian knew Xia Qingzhu very well. Although this woman concealed it very well, Yi Xian could still see some things from her eyes. Hatred, helplessness, guilt and some indescribable emotions. The young girl beside Xia Qingzhu seemed to be an ordinary person. She had cultivated some kind of technique that completely concealed her cultivation. She didn't dare to reveal anything in front of Yi Xian. But who was Yi Xian? He was a cultivator at the tribulation stage and had a half-immortal body. He was very sensitive to auras. With a simple glance, Yi Xian could tell that the young girl was a connate martial artist. Although Yi Xian didn't know what Xia Qingzhu wanted to do, it didn't matter. Because Yi Xian knew that some ants couldn't help but want to attack him. They were afraid of his cultivation and didn't dare to do it openly. They could only use Xia Qingzhu to achieve their goal. 7 days later. Caesar Hotel, Jiangnan City. All kinds of luxurious cars were parked in front of the hotel. Celebrities from all walks of life came out of the cars. Master Xia was greeting the guests with a smile on his face. Inside the Caesar Hotel, guests gathered in 2s and 3s. They held red wine glasses and talked from time to time. It was as if they were here for a party instead of a wedding banquet. However, they looked out of the corner of their eyes from time to time, as if they were waiting for someone to appear. Today is my daughter's engagement banquet. I, Xia Taijun, am honored to have all my old friends here. Here's a toast to you. Xia Taijun raised his glass to toast the guests, but he only got a sparse response. This made Xia Taijun blush and an awkward smile appeared on his face. In fact, this engagement banquet seemed grand and luxurious, and the guests were even more extraordinary. However, these guests didn't come because of the Xia family. They really came here because of one person. Yi Xian. Yes, it was Yi Xian. Ever since Yi Xian defeated Wu Juexian and became the #1 expert in the East, everyone wanted to build a relationship with Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian never saw any guests, which made them feel very helpless. The so-called Xia family, which used to be one of the 8 great families in Jingdu, had long declined and was no longer as glorious as before. If the guests didn't know that Xia Qingzhu used to be in a relationship with Yi Xian, they wouldn't have come at all. The guests from all over the world came here today to attend Xia Qingzhu's engagement banquet, but it was more accurate to say that they were waiting for Yi Xian to appear. If Yi Xian could appear here, as long as they could build a relationship with him, it would be enough for them to brag about for the rest of their lives. There have been rumors that Mr. Yi and the Xia family's daughter are old friends. Do you think this rumor is true? I don't think so. If the two of them really have an old relationship, why would the Xia family dare to marry their daughter to Japan? Aren't they afraid of Mr. Ye's wrath? Sigh, I thought that Yi Xian would be here, but now it seems that I came here for nothing. The guests discussed in low voices. Although their voices were very soft, they fell into Xia Tiejuan's ears. This made his face turn red, but helplessness and regret flashed across his eyes. It was no wonder that Xia Taijun felt regretful. Back then, he was still the head of the Xia family, and he strongly opposed Xia Qingzhu and Yi Xian being together. However, after a few years, the young man that he used to look down on had grown into a person that the world respected. How could Xia Taijun not sigh? Mr. Yi Xian has arrived. Suddenly, a cry of surprise came from outside the door, which stunned the guests. Then, ecstasy appeared on their faces as they all looked at the door. Yi Xian, dressed in black, was walking toward the crowd. When he reached the center, the guests quickly bowed and greeted him. Everyone's faces were filled with excitement. Greetings, Mr. Yi. Mr. Yi, I'm the head of the Fong family. This is my business card. Mr. Yi, before Xia Taijun could step forward, the guests quickly arrived in front of Yi Xian. All sorts of flattering voices were heard. Everyone's faces were filled with excitement, and they kept introducing themselves to Yi Xian. It was also at this moment that Xia Taijun hurriedly pushed the crowd away and quickly walked to Yi Xian. He forced a smile and said, "Nephew Yi, please take a seat." Chapter 164. In the face of Xia Tiejuan's enthusiasm, Yi Xian was very calm. He was as calm as a lake without any ripples. Yi Xian clearly remembered that when he was young, it was this man who looked down on him and told him to leave his daughter. He also told him that he was an abandoned son of the Yi family and was not worthy of his daughter. The stars moved and the years passed like a shuttle. The once humble boy grew up to be a dragon in the sky, while Xia Taijun became an insignificant ant. This was perhaps the pain in Xia Tiejuan's heart for the rest of his life. Under Xia Tiejuan's guidance, Yi Xian sat in the first row. It was also at this time that the engagement ceremony finally began. Elegant and melodious music was played. A bright red carpet was spread out. The red carpet was covered with fresh flowers. 2 figures were walking from the end of the red carpet. Xia Qingzhu was dressed in a white wedding dress. She looked cold and noble, and her exquisite collarbone was exposed. Her skin, which looked as if it had been carved from ivory, shone with a crystalline light. Xia Qingzhu was truly beautiful. It was a kind of cold and elegant beauty. At this moment, she was holding the arm of the man beside her and slowly walking towards the priest. The man beside Xia Qingzhu was dressed in a Japanese kimono. He was about 20 years old. His face was very handsome, but at this moment, his face was a little pale and his gaze was erratic. Until the two of them walked past Yi Xian was also very calm. He looked at Xia Qingzhu's back indifferently. When he opened and closed his eyes, his gaze was a little erratic. That year, he was young and tender. That year, she had her first awakening of love. The young Yi Xian once had a dream, and that was to personally put on a white wedding dress for Xia Qingzhu. Just like now, he would hold her hand and hold a grand wedding under the witness of the priest. However, 4 years of life in the blood sea made him gradually mature and grow up. In Yi Xian's eyes, his dream was just a joke. The wedding march was playing. The couple exchanged engagement rings under the blessing of the priest. When the engagement ceremony was completed, all the guests present applauded. Clap, clap, clap. Yi Xian smiled and applauded. It was as if he was really here to attend the wedding and bring his most sincere blessings. After the ceremony ended, a luxurious banquet began. Xia Qingzhu and the man beside her toasted the guests one by one to express their thanks for coming. Yi Xian was the center of attention. When Xia Qingzhu walked towards Yi Xian, the guests fell silent. They all focused their gazes on Yi Xian as a strange light flashed through their eyes. Obviously, the rumors that Yi Xian and Xia Qingzhu were old friends had never been proven. However, today was Xia Qingzhu's wedding, and Yi Xian had really appeared. Obviously, this rumor was not baseless. This caused all sorts of thoughts to arise in the hearts of the guests present. Hey, do you think this Mr. Yi will snatch her away and take her away from here? Have you watched too many movies? If Mr. Yi really wanted to do that, he would have done it long ago. How could the mere Xia family dare to stop him? That's right. Such a melodramatic plot only exists in movies. If Mr. Yi really does that, I'm afraid the Xia family will be overjoyed. After all, with the reputation of the #1 expert in the East, the Xia family will rise again. The guests present discussed animatedly as they watched the development of the situation. At this moment, under everyone's gaze, Xia Qingzhu and the Japanese man arrived in front of Yi Xian. A waiter brought a pot of wine and bowed beside Xia Qingzhu. Looking at Yi Xian's calm face, Xia Qingzhu bit her lips and said bitterly, "Yi Xian, thank you for attending my wedding. Once, when I was young, I had a dream, and that was to personally put on a wedding dress for you. Although this dream didn't come true, being able to see you in a wedding dress today can be considered as fulfilling my wish back then," Yi Xian said with a smile, giving people a sense of tranquility and indifference. Brother Yi. Thank you for attending my wedding with Qingzhu. This little brother toasts you. The Japanese man's face was pale, and even his voice was trembling slightly. However, he still filled the cup with wine and handed it to Yi Xian. Are you afraid of me? Yi Xian said with deep eyes. Although Yi Xian was smiling, the Japanese man's legs were a little weak. Cold sweat kept flowing from his forehead, and he could not continue speaking. Yi Xian, don't mind him. My husband hasn't seen much of the world. Naturally, he's a little nervous when he sees a big shot like you. Xia Qingzhu's face turned pale and she quickly explained. Yes, that's right, please forgive me, Brother Yi. The Japanese man wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and said with a trembling voice. Xia Qingzhu raised the wine jug and filled the cup with wine. However, her action caused Yi Xian to narrow his eyes. This was because Yi Xian could feel that Xia Qingzhu's arm was trembling slightly when she poured the wine for him. Yi Xian, thank you for attending Qingzhu's wedding. I toast you with this cup of wine. Without waiting for Yi Xian to speak, Xia Qingzhu raised her head and drank the wine in the cup. Her delicate face flushed red. Looking at the clear wine in the cup, Yi Xian smiled. He did not drink the wine in the cup. Instead, he looked deeply at Xia Qingzhu and said, "Do you really want me to drink this cup of wine?" As Yi Xian's words fell, Xia Taijun and Xia Qingzhu's faces instantly turned pale. However, this was not the end. With a plop, the Japanese man's legs went soft and he collapsed to the ground. His body could not help but tremble. Such a scene stunned the guests present, and a sense of uneasiness rose in their hearts. My son-in-law was born with epilepsy. Someone, quickly take him away and let the doctor treat him, Xia Taijun quickly said. A waiter quickly took the Japanese man away. At this moment, Yi Xian held the wine cup in his hand and looked at Xia Qingzhu quietly. This made the woman's eyes fill with tears. She did not dare to look into Yi Xian's eyes. Crack! Yi Xian finished the wine in the cup in one gulp and casually threw the wine cup to the ground. The sound of the wine cup shattering could be heard at this moment. Yi Xian, I'm sorry. Bang! Xia Qingzhu knelt on the ground. A large amount of tears wet the ground. Her body was trembling, and her heart was filled with guilt. A woman's tears are really cheap. Looking at Xia Qingzhu kneeling in front of him, Yi Xian smiled coldly. Then, he looked around and said, You've been watching for so long. It's time for you to come out. Clap, clap, clap. Suddenly, the sound of clapping could be heard. The girl who had once accompanied Xia Qingzhu walked out from the shadows. Her face was filled with a smug and sinister smile. Dozens of black-clothed warriors also walked out from the shadows. Terrifying killing intent filled the entire wedding banquet. There's an old saying in Xia country that heroes can't resist the charms of beautiful women. Mr. Yi, I have to say that you knew that the wine was poisoned, but you still drank it. This makes me admire you greatly. The girl praised Yi Xian as she clapped. However, the way she looked at Yi Xian was as if she was looking at a dead person. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.